The man casually forged a sword's sheath, which shocked every hunter in the examination hall. Even Yun-ha, one of the strongest currently, wanted to rush forward and snatch it immediately. The sight left all the judges unable to believe their eyes, for the sword he made was radiating an extremely terrifying presence. After the system appraised it, this fire-attributed sword sheath reached super rare grade, able both to store and to amplify magical power many times over. No one understood how a contestant could possess such frightening smithing skill, but they did not know that in his previous life this man had been the strongest blacksmith, and with his forging talent he had created countless god-tier weapons for heroes. Afterwards he even joined them in killing 6 destructive demigods. Yet despite humanity's victory, they still could not survive, because among those 6 destructive demigods, there was one called the Sea of Destruction. Though he was dead, most of the land remained swallowed by the sea of death he created. Thinking of that, Si-hoon couldn't help but laugh at himself. I barely survived only to finally die in this sea. The surviving heroes also fell one after another. Even the hero tower holding back the land collapsed. This damn sea did not dissipate even though the demigod had been killed. At that moment, a man behind him cut in. Are you really planning to put on a one-man show here? Seong-ha stepped in front of Si-hoon. He frowned slightly at his shabby appearance. Anyone looking would think he carried the whole world on his shoulders. Mad dog Yom Seong-ha. Hearing that, Louise turned and taunted back at the mockery. The guy who was just sprawled out pretending to be ill now wants to play the hero. Violent dog Louise Valen. Meanwhile, Amir clutched his head and complained, I told you so, right? Big bro is just enjoying himself after taking command of the Legion. Bandit dog Amir Singh. After a brief silence and despite their rotating criticism, Si-hoon coldly ordered, stop talking nonsense. You lot would be dead already if it weren't for the gear I made. Last blacksmith Lee Si-hoon. No sooner had he finished than Seong-ha flew into a rage. What? Louise beside him couldn't help remarking that the guy spoke harshly. Amir reminded him, big bro, that was a bit much. Then he burst out a curse that made the atmosphere suddenly suffocating. Shut up, you brats. If you won't use them, hand all the gear back to me. At that moment, Si-hoon's mind held only one thought. The 3 standing before me are the trio of dogs. They don't side with humanity. Nor do they belong to those damned demons. They act only according to their own whims. They always put personal gain above all else. Opportunists who stand outside the war to profit. Though utterly selfish scoundrels, they survived to this moment and ultimately were the most active players. Thinking this, Si-hoon vaguely wondered whether things would have turned out better if they had acted earlier. Once again his gaze was pierced by the sun at the edge of the sea. Si-hoon calmly sat down on the ground and glanced back. Is there anyone left who can still hold out? Hearing this, Yom Seong-ha doubled over, clutching his stomach, and let out a hoarse sound. I'm at my limit. All my insides have been crushed. Louise looked up into the void and spoke slowly. Our side isn't doing any better. It seems we're cursed. The blood won't stop flowing. Meanwhile, Amir kept groaning that his heart is pierced and he's probably done for. Seeing that, Si-hoon sighed helplessly. See, you should have worked together from the start. Even as they were dying, he coldly scolded them instead of selfishly only looking out for themselves. You 3 damned dogs. Suddenly a loud noise rang out, catching Si-hoon's attention. He saw Yom Seong-ha's group, and Amir had collapsed. Faced with that scene, he stood up calmly and let out a soft sigh. They managed to be a nuisance right until the end. Then Si-hoon stepped forward and gently took hold of the hammer. Si-hoon raised the object into the air, his gaze fixed on the metal piece below. After a moment, he carefully drove the blades into the ground beside Amir's body. Si-hoon's voice grew hoarse with anger. Appreciate your gear a little. It's smashed to bits. How are you supposed to use it? He thought to himself that at least this pile could serve as their tombstone. When finished, Si-hoon looked up at the endless sky, standing silently amid the screaming sea wind. He mocked himself. Is it my turn now? Si-hoon's blood-cracked hand slowly rose, his expression calm to the point of chill. This will be the last time I do this. Immediately, he struck the center of his chest hard. Space trembled slightly and lines of luminous text floated before Si-hoon as an emotionless voice echoed in his head. Initiating link extraction from subject Lee Si-hoon. The link level with the creator Lee Si-hoon reached a negative rank. A crystal appeared in his hand. A pale blue light shimmered around the ore-like core as the cold system explained the unique skill. A linked blacksmith can extract special ore from a connected target. The ore's effects depend on the relationship and potential of the subject. Si-hoon stared at the crystal, thinking that if he used it on himself, it would be worse than a scrap of ordinary iron. A colorless ore, a link ore extracted from Si-hoon, utterly empty. If only he'd awakened this ability a little earlier. He looked at the pale ore in his hand, nails digging in, whispering like a plea to the dark. If there's nothing inside, then swallow the remorse that's tormenting me. Then Si-hoon suddenly lifted the hammer high as a thunderous sound echoed from afar. He looked up at the churning Black Sea. The sound could be that of the Sea of Death or the waves he'd heard for so long, but one thing he was sure of, whenever that sound rang in his ears. In that moment, Si-hoon wildly brought the hammer down on the object. A bold thought struck him that a masterpiece beyond imagination would be born. At the final blow, a column of light suddenly shot straight up into the sky. He raised the knife high and said in a low, resolute voice, "Until the end, there still won't be any special ability." After saying that, Si-hoon couldn't help mocking himself. He had expected something good to appear, even if it were the link stone of himself. Staring at the colorless metal in his hand, he muttered that it remained monotonous to the point of boredom. Instead, "I'll end this life with my own hands." At that moment, Si-hoon's facial muscles suddenly tensed and his eyes rolled back. Then he burst into a warped laugh that rang across the Dead Sea, both manic and tragic. "I'm a madman to think the only thing I'd do until the end is swing a smith's hammer." In that instant, Si-hoon's mind sank into a tangle of thoughts, and when he discarded the last sword, he realized a truth. The sound of the waves that has often appeared since I awakened my magic. All this time, I kept wondering what that noise meant. It turns out it was the presence of the Sea of Destruction. His eyes closed, regret weighing on him like a boulder, lips moving in remorse. If only I had understood that earlier or had persuaded those 3 dogs sooner. Then Si-hoon denied it. No, if I had forged for others earlier, even by a little, maybe things could have shifted in another direction. The space around Si-hoon suddenly twisted, and a massive image of ancient equipment appeared. An announcer's voice echoed, "The spiritual image of the apparatus has manifested. The primal regression mental echo skill is activating." Amid the blinding light, a strange voice sounded, calm and composed. "Welcome, contestant." He snapped his eyes open. Breathing hard, he couldn't help feeling a little startled. "What, I'm not dead yet?" Opposite him, Assistant Ha stared blankly and watched. "Contestant Lee Si-hoon, what on earth are you doing?" Hearing that, Lee Si-hoon shuddered slightly. "Contestant, it's been 31 years since I last heard that word." Then he suddenly shouted, "How can you be dazed here in the middle of the entrance exam?" At those words, Si-hoon widened his eyes. "What?" Si-hoon rolled his eyes around the exam hall. Could this be about something from 31 years ago? Could this be a babel of the past? Are these memories surfacing before I close my eyes? His gaze flashed in shock as he recalled the final moment. Wait, the mental echo phenomenon manifested just before I died. The air around Si-hoon seemed to freeze, heavy breathing. Is this a regression to the starting point? Could this really be caused by the weapon made of link stone? Assistant Ha said sternly, "This is your final warning, contestant Lee Si-hoon." He added that if Si-hoon didn't perform properly now, he would be expelled. At that, Si-hoon instinctively nodded yes. Si-hoon stared at the hammer below, so that's what regression means. His hand tightened in the air as if gripping an invisible hammer handle. If I had recognized the gifts sooner and started swinging the hammer earlier, could I have changed everything? Si-hoon violently denied it. No, that's not the most important thing. His breathing slowed, his heartbeat steadied. His body felt reborn in that awakening moment as he stared at his palm. Only one thing truly mattered now, and I must accomplish it. Thinking that, Si-hoon's mouth curved. He straightened his back in the room, eyes blazing like a forge rekindling its first flame. A deep voice rang in his mind. "You must protect everything." Si-hoon's mouth curved again. He resolved that in this life he would pass the Babel exam. He gently swung the hammer high, eyes lighting with resolve. Dealing with those 3 dogs is only the beginning. Then suddenly a small flame flared. In-cheol shivered slightly and leaned toward Si-hoon's forge. Surprise lit his eyes, that contestant. He watched Si-hoon wildly hammering the metal. In-cheol immediately stepped closer, eyes fixed on Si-hoon's hands, astonishing. It looked slow, but the rhythm matched a clear, pure resonance perfectly. He cautiously followed the metal piece forming in Si-hoon's hands, thinking this is truly top-tier smithing skill. At that moment, Anon stood motionless, eyes still fixed on him. He swallowed dryly, eyes never leaving the bar of iron taking shape. What level of perfection is this? At the same time, Assistant Ha widened his eyes in shock. Did he really make that? Seeing that, Anon sneered. A prodigy contestant has applied. If he submitted that as is, he'd have passed immediately. Just then, Si-hoon slammed the hammer down on the metal. A loud bang drew everyone's attention. Then suddenly the metal shattered into fragments. Assistant Ha nearly froze in his tracks. On the other side, In-cheol was so astonished his eyes widened. After a moment of silence, his mouth twitched. although I still have a long way to go, bragging about garbage like that. He halted the hammer midair, his gaze turning cold. As a blacksmith, I absolutely cannot accept that. Witnessing the scene, Assistant Ha shouted frantically, "You just destroyed a weapon in front of the professor. Do you think smithing is a joke?" Si-hoon calmly called out, "Judge." Before Inchial's bewildered eyes, he nonchalantly made a request. "I want to redo the test." Then he shouted again, "Hey contestant," he suddenly cut in Assistant Ha. Inchial folded his arms and ordered curtly but decisively, "Bring him the remaining materials." Assistant Ha, astonished, stammered, "What?" He raised an eyebrow and shot him a cold look. "He didn't actually break the rules, did he? Or do you want me to fetch them myself?" Not daring to object, Assistant Ha hurriedly replied, "I'll bring the materials right away." Inchial stepped closer to the forge and looked straight into Si-hoon's eyes, his voice warm but pressured. "Young man," he sternly reminded him, "do you know there are only 40 minutes left in the exam?" Si-hoon only nodded yes. Inchial stared at the shards and asked curiously, "So you think smashing it was the right decision?" At that, Si-hoon's gaze flicked quickly toward the destroyed metal pieces. Finally, he turned to Inchial with unwavering determination. "I cannot submit something like that." On the other side, Inchial tilted his head, his eyes thoughtful, then slowly said, "Very well, do your best." After a moment, Si-hoon's eyes once again flared with the fire of determination. He took a deep breath, feeling this young but frail body, and told himself tensely, "With this body, perfect forging is truly difficult." Thinking that, Si-hoon frowned. Mana, strength, and even time are running out. So the best choice in this situation is… Suddenly, a sharp sizzle erupted from the forge. Several contestants jumped and turned. "What was that?" one shouted in panic. "That bastard is pumping mana into the ignition stones." Someone lunged forward half a step and yelled, "Hey, what are you doing? If those stones catch fire, they'll explode. Hurry in." Meanwhile, Si-hoon calmly reached out and activated the flame. The room fell silent as a five-colored fire flared violently without exploding. Someone exclaimed, "Huh, no way, that madman." At that moment, an invisible stream of mana suddenly shot straight at him. Facing the terrifying sight, several people panicked and yelled, "It's on fire, bring the extinguisher, quick." Assistant Ha trembled as he pleaded, "Professor, tell him to stop." Inchial merely replied offhandedly, "Let him continue. And don't say the contestants, not even you may react like that." As he said this, he seriously signaled, "Observe the flow of the flame carefully." He couldn't help feeling a bit unsettled, strange. Right before Si-hoon was the five-hued fire mana, a high-temperature flame amplified by the resonance of 5 kinds of ignition. He curled his lips in a smile, eyes fixed on the flame. It demanded extremely precise mana control. But it's an outstanding technique, one that can even be used when mana is at a minimum. A contestant stammered in disbelief. "What, it didn't explode?" Another hesitated. "Wait, could that be?" Someone pointed at the ingot in the forge and shouted in amazement, "The color of the ingot has changed." Seeing that, Inchial quickly realized, so that's it. He resonated the ignition stones to amplify the firepower and alter the ingot's properties. He looked at Si-hoon with concern. This would significantly shorten the time needed for forging. However, with only 30 minutes left, time was still tight. Thinking that, Inchial silently affirmed that Si-hoon's earlier forging sequence was excellent too. But if that's all, he wouldn't finish in time. Sharp metal shards flew into the air. Seeing this, he sneered, a rare light flickering in his eyes. Then Si-hoon clamped his bare hand tightly around the object and slowly fed it into the forge. Si-hoon breathed out in strained gasps. After a while, he resumed hammering the metal fiercely. Suddenly, Si-hoon's arm froze midair. Gritting his teeth, he felt his mana drained. Muttering, "Damn it, I'm out of mana," and the barriers collapsed. "Damn this frail body, I need to start training as soon as this exam ends." Yet somehow Si-hoon's palm was bleeding, fresh blood slowly spreading across his hand. In that moment, he had only one thought: "I cannot waste a single second." Then Si-hoon again hammered like a madman, silently deciding to push his body to the limit. At that moment, Inchial's voice rang out. 10 minutes, 3 minutes in the final minute. He barked, the sound shaking the space. 1 minute. No sooner had the word left his mouth than Si-hoon instantly raised the sword in his hand. Inchial shouted again, "Stop." He slightly opened his mouth and exhaled. At that moment, Si-hoon clenched his hand under the table, fresh blood continuously dripping. Simultaneously, the system's bright screen flashed. Complete, the 5-hued flame sword was finished. "You have acquired Artisan Flame Skill C." An announcement continued to ring in the air. The evaluation result for the 5-hued flame sword was high quality ranking. High, upper mid. A curved blade engraved with 5 flames, the fires compressed within the blade react to mana, producing brilliant colors. This item reveals the maker's potential. The sword's color and properties may vary slightly depending on the nature of the mana infused. Someone repeated in a trembling voice, "The weapon's rank is high." Si-hoon added calmly, "I hope you'll check the detailed description in the info window. Everyone can see that's a passing result." Assistant Ha burst out, excited, his voice almost shouting as the air erupted. "He passed." Incheol waved his hand to signal silence. "Quiet, you brat." He immediately lowered his voice, "Sorry, sir." The scene shifted to a room. It was Professor Kim Incheol's office. Inside, he glanced back anxiously. Si-hoon sat up straight at the desk and asked with unwavering eyes, "Is this sword worthy to submit this time?" Incheol was silent for a moment, then replied, "For now, yes." He exhaled and said, "You still don't look very satisfied, Lee Si-hoon. I'll be frank." Incheol spoke in a heavy tone, as if carrying the weight of the eight. "This place won't meet your standards," he emphasized each word. "You'd be better off withdrawing your application." Incheol continued in a low voice, "Babel's reputation may be overwhelming, but the metallurgy department hasn't produced any notable achievements lately." Si-hoon remained silent and squinted at him. "That's a truth I already know very well. Babel's metallurgy department is scheduled to close in 8 years due to declining standards. In the future, the Vulcan Academy will become the world's leading blacksmithing school." After a moment's hesitation, Incheol tentatively suggested that perhaps Vulcan would be the best place. Hearing this, Si-hoon cut in, "You're wrong, Professor. The best place won't be Vulcan." He pointed at himself with confident eyes. "It will be Babel, where I'm about to enroll." At that, Incheol flinched slightly, his gaze visibly unsettled. Incheol stared at Si-hoon with a mix of suspicion and obvious astonishment. Incheol narrowed his eyes and studied him sharply, speaking slowly and challengingly. "In that case, you must first become the top student of the department. Are you confident?" Without hesitation, he answered, "Of course. At least at the student level, no one will surpass me." No sooner had he finished than Incheol's expression changed. He asked sternly, "Do you know the process for selecting the department's top freshmen at Babel?" Given the question, Si-hoon quickly recited the information like a machine. They select a candidate for department valedictorian through a supplementary exam between the top 2 students, and from those candidates the valedictorian is determined. "That's what I know." Babel divides its students broadly into 3 departments. Combat Department Ackerquif, Support Department Technology Department Borsipa. Within each department, dozens of majors intertwine like root systems. Becoming the department's valedictorian means you've received the highest evaluation across those numerous majors, and are recognized by all of Babel as top talent. Back in reality, Incheol showed clear signs of tension. His arms tightened until they trembled. Incheol turned to Si-hoon and said earnestly in a low voice, "I'll say it again, not as a professor but as a senior blacksmith." He continued in a weary tone, "Even if you become the department's valedictorian, it's hard to expect success here as a blacksmith. Go to Vulcan Academy." Incheol nodded slightly as if deciding for him. "That's the path for you." Si-hoon looked at the man before him with rare respect, thinking inwardly to place his successor's future above his own. He is indeed a decent man. After a moment's silence, Si-hoon once more asserted that environment doesn't matter, as I just said. His eyes brightened and he exclaimed cheerfully, "Babel, where I'm about to enroll, will soon become the best place." Incheol was briefly puzzled where he will become the best, yet the corner of his mouth lifted in interest. Incheol couldn't help laughing and reached out toward Si-hoon. It was a statement beyond arrogance, but for some reason I didn't hate it. He reached out, looking at him sincerely. "I very much look forward to working with you." Seeing that, Si-hoon didn't hesitate and gripped Incheol's hand, squeezing it with force. The corner of his mouth lifted. "Same here." Sparkling lines of text appeared before him. A link to target Kim Incheol has been established. The creator link Si-hoon is at level 1 and is extracting the link from target Kim Incheol. Si-hoon tightened his grip and a floating object appeared in the center of his palm. A chunk of metal manifested, an embering fire burning within as the system described. Iron link bearing flame. Rank high quality upper mid, a metal that possesses flame. It has wood-like properties and can store fire within. At Si-hoon's home, he stared in bewilderment at the burning object in his hand. Si-hoon turned the small metal piece in his hand. "Not bad, but is it only this size?" He pressed his lips and analyzed that link extraction quantifies the relationship with a specific target to derive ore types that don't exist. Si-hoon stared at the metal, his expression darkening. "The problem is the link level is low, making it hard to utilize now." Looking at the stats before him, he gave a bitter smile. Moreover, compared to Babel's new students, his indicators are pathetic. Si-hoon lifted his head and sighed helplessly, regrettable, but if that's the price for returning to the past, it's still cheap. He murmured inwardly to steady himself, "Right, don't rush." A murderous gleam flashed in Si-hoon's eyes as he thought of the future. Wanting more than this is mere greed. There's still time to crush those demonic bastards. The demonic world monsters threaten not just humanity, but the entire planet. The 6 great demigods causing humanity's annihilation was entirely their plan. Si-hoon stared into the void, thinking that to stop them he cannot be choosy about means or methods. He mustn't be thrown off by future events, so first he needs weapons or skills tied to those memories. He nodded slightly as confirmation to himself. The first step of enrolling in Babel is settled. Then at that moment a flash of light drew Si-hoon's attention. His eyes widened in astonishment. This is. The system announced solemnly, user Si-hoon's link level has reached level 1. Link imprint skill has been added. 1 week later at Babel Academy, Babel appeared under the morning sun. Meanwhile in a hallway of the academy, Si-hoon exhaled in frustration. Damn it, I'm lost again. This is the right place, isn't it? He looked around the wide corridor and stopped when he saw the familiar sign. Here it is. As he entered, Si-hoon cautiously greeted good morning when someone abruptly cut in. Trainee Lee Si-hoon. After a moment of bewilderment, he went rigid. Michael tapped the table slowly and remarked sarcastically, "You seem pretty relaxed, huh?" Michael raised an eyebrow and glanced toward the crowded waiting room. "Can't you see everyone's waiting?" Michael Barmut, Vice Dean of Borsapa. Hearing that, In-cheol couldn't help but interject. "Vice Dean, there's still 10 minutes before the supplementary exam starts." Michael cut in at once. "It's not about time, it's about attitude." His voice deepened. "I'll have to warn him about this." Si-hoon looked briefly embarrassed and sighed inwardly. It's not just the metallurgy department that's in bad shape, he's also clashing with his superiors. Si-hoon's gaze shifted to In-cheol. Now I understand why he recommended another student. As he continued to glance around, hands turned to look with undisguised anger. His eyes landed on Si-hoon and scanned him from head to toe. Si-hoon froze for a moment and his arm dropped unconsciously. After a brief hesitation, Si-hoon slowly spoke. "Very pleased to meet you," responding to Hans's disdainful attitude. He forced a smile. "What's with this brat acting all immature? It's been a long time since I've been treated like this." "How boring, really unbelievable." At that moment, a voice rang out to draw everyone's attention. "Has everyone gathered?" Immediately after, a figure appeared in the dazzling sunlight. Seeing that, Si-hoon and Hans both turned around at once. "Over here," Michael exhaled. "We were wondering when you'd arrive, Dean." At the same time, Si-hoon widened his eyes as he saw the other person. The one was. Yoonha immediately sat down, eyes level with Si-hoon. She stared at him coldly and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry I'm late." Ryu Yoonha, Dean of Borsapa at Babel. At the sight of her, Si-hoon couldn't help feeling a bit unsettled. Why is she here? The moment he saw Yoonha, Si-hoon went pale, his gaze dropping as if looking at a distant memory. "We'd heard rumors that she used to work at Babel." Thinking this made him even more uneasy, unexpectedly, that person now occupies the dean's seat. An S-rank hero who devours weapons, Ryu Yoonha is a superhuman with a unique ability to increase power by absorbing arms. "Before I traveled back in time, she was just a regular customer who often visited my shop." Long after that, Yoonha appeared in a disheveled state. Her voice softened, her eyes curved like a smile but hid an unreadable remorse. "I truly regret having eaten your weapon." Meanwhile, Si-hoon stood motionless and did not respond to Yoonha. Then silence fell. She lowered her head. On this side, Si-hoon showed an angry expression, grinding his teeth so hard his body trembled. In the end, he could only helplessly bow his head. Back in reality, a short, firm call pulled him from his thoughts. "Hoon, Si-hoon." Si-hoon snapped awake and quickly replied yes. In-cheol spoke in a steady, low voice, scanning each candidate. "We'll begin explaining the exam content. Everyone focus." He emphasized each word with a tightened tone. "You will have a total of 90 minutes to complete this test." In-cheol paused, then continued. "During those 90 minutes, your task is to forge an equipment piece that can harmonize with the sword from the previous exam." In-cheol suddenly paused for a few seconds, creating a heavy silence. But his voice grew colder, each word clear as a command. "You are only allowed to use alchemical forging techniques to craft it." In-cheol tilted his head toward the row of gleaming ore racks regarding materials. "You are free to choose any ore available here." In-cheol's voice lowered. His gaze swept the two examiners with respect. "The finished work will be personally evaluated by Dean Yoonha and Vice Dean Michael, so pour your heart into creating something you can be proud of." Then he decisively lowered his hand. His voice rang like an opening bell. "Very well." Standing before the two of them, Si-hoon and Hans, In-cheol shouted, "The official exam begins." After a moment, Si-hoon murmured under his breath, "Only alchemical forging is allowed." Si-hoon pressed his lips for a moment, eyes fixed on the pile of materials. He must create resonance with pure magic to prevent the primal spirit energy from erupting. Hearing that, Hans gave a thin laugh. You think staring at that ore pile will make your mana rise? Sihun looked up slowly, his gaze cooling. Did I hear that right? Sihun asked curiously, were you just aiming that mockery at me? Hans smirked. Who else is here but us? Just then Inchial's voice sounded coldly. Hans Barmut refrained from making comments unrelated to the exam. He lowered his head slightly and said he'll be more careful. Sihun froze for a moment. Hans Barmut. What the hell? This guy turns out to be the son of an examiner, Michael Barmut. Thinking that, Sihun grinned wickedly. No wonder they look so alike. Sihun glared at him resentfully. The more he thought about it, the more absurd it seemed. Hans inwardly thought that it looked like Sihun had recognized him. He curled his lip disdainfully. I am the Vice Dean's heir. You're just a commoner with low birth and the weakest mana among the candidates. I was born into the famed Barmut family of alchemical forging and possess magical power rivaling the top graduate of the second year. The outcome of this confrontation was decided from the start. Yunha watched their every move and smiled faintly. Lazurite and Hinam Jade both are materials containing enormous reserves of mana. Moreover, they are primal ores harboring water element spirit energy. Hearing this, Inchial continued in a low tone. Water element mana is highly vulnerable to fire, making it extremely difficult to forge these ores. Michael curled his lip. That's old news. Modern alchemical forging techniques have progressed far beyond the past. Cutting in on his arrogant expression, Inchial said, indeed, alchemical forging isn't bound by space or circumstance, but crafting time varies by the practitioner and ore type. Under today's conditions, it should take only 30 minutes. Michael continued to grin with a chilling malice, lowering his voice. Hans can synthesize any ore in just half an hour. A few days ago, Hans spun a crystal with spirit energy. Inchial couldn't help feeling unsettled. Synthesize a resonance in only 30 minutes. He involuntarily shivered. What? If his skill reaches the point of completing a resonance synthesis in 30 minutes, then he's far beyond second-year students, let alone freshmen. Inchial's gaze swept over him, suspicion forming. So they compressed the time to forge magical stone, pre-stocked abundant raw materials, and dictated the alchemical forging method. They deliberately chose a test topic that absolutely favors Hans, who already excels in alchemical forging. Inchial's eyes fixed on his face. Michael is cunning like a venomous snake. After a moment of silence, Sihun exhaled softly. This is fine. Yunha looked at him curiously, clearly a bit surprised. That is. The group's gazes were fixed on him. Hydrate stone and crimson fire stone. Michael frowned slightly, clearly sensing unstable fluctuations from those two mineral blocks. They were fire attribute versions of Lazurite and Hinam Jade with sky-high mana concentrations. He coldly remarked that he didn't know how capable the kid was, but his ego was definitely enormous. Over here, Hans couldn't help glancing at Sihun. He squinted at Sihun's pile of materials. Did he deliberately pick ores that completely contrasted with his own? Thinking this, Hans chuckled. What a fool, with your meager mana, don't even dream of controlling the crimson fire stone. He smiled faintly. His gaze dropped. This looks easier than I thought. Suddenly, Hans's expression changed. Turning back to Sihun, a system notification sounded. The Covenant Inscription skill has been activated, the system's voice rang dryly. Magical light surrounded his body. Covenant Inscription Harmony is active. Covenant Inscription allows the user to attach Covenant stones to available equipment slots. Left hand. The right hand was equipping the Iron Fire bracelet on his right arm, and then a flame slowly fell straight down. Sihun's arm was seen engulfed by the flame. Witnessing that, Hans clenched his teeth. That guy, what useless tricks is he using? Meanwhile, he continued to concentrate on activating the metal blocks. The iron ores began to spin around each other. Seeing this, Sihun curled his lips in a smile. A spark of blazing light shone in his eyes. At the same time, Yunha's group still stared at him. Over here, Michael raised an eyebrow. Is he planning to create resonance by using the same attribute as the mineral? How foolish! The basic principle is to use pure mana to make primal mineral stones resonate with each other. He silently judged that if he forced it that way, sooner or later the magical elements would erupt out of control. Thinking that, Michael sneered, the idiot. Surely he's about to cause an accident. Then suddenly Sihun swung his arm forward. A layer of scales was seen covering his arm. The space fell silent. Sihun held his pose. Witnessing that, Inchial and Yunha quickly bowed their heads. Meanwhile, Michael's eyes widened. What is this terrifying pyrotechnic power? At that moment, a sword was formed. Upon seeing it, Sihun barely moved his lips. The system voice immediately reached his ear. Iron Fire bracelet unequipped. Equipment processing complete. Congratulations, you have successfully crafted the flame-accumulating sword sheath. Before the horrific scene, Yoonha's eyes widened in astonishment. Michael was so shocked his whole body froze. He couldn't help feeling somewhat unsettled. Impossible, did he really succeed? The system screen flashed. Flame-accumulating sword sheath. Rarity. Rare. Low quality. A sword sheath infused with concentrated fire attribute mana, capable of storing and amplifying flame spirit energy, allowing the use of the special skill Firestorm. At the same time, cold sweat trickled down Hans's temple. He had finished the synthesis. How could the speed be that fast? He stared blankly at his palm, his mind screaming in chaos. This is completely illogical. The magical elements should have exploded. Thinking that, Hans grew even more unsettled. Maybe he'd misunderstood something, and just then, Michael jolted. He hurriedly shouted, "Wait, stop at once. If you dare load primal spirit energy into those magic stones, then." The orb in Hans's hand began to tremble violently. His vision was suddenly obscured by heat. Then the sphere unexpectedly exploded. Shards flew everywhere. A loud blast rang out, the space shuddering in waves. That afternoon, in the refining department's exam hall, the scene cut to a room where crystal fragments lay scattered across the floor. Over here, Hans appeared with a scratched-up face. After a brief silence, Inchial hesitated before speaking, normally after a thorough evaluation. He faltered for a moment, teeth clenched as if swallowing uncontrollable irritation. One of the two will be nominated as the department's top graduate. At that, Inchial raised his head to look directly at Hans. However, it's regrettable that in that instant, he shrank back, clutching his bleeding arm. His gaze landed on Hans and then continued. Unexpectedly, the exam ended with one side having to forfeit. At the same time, Michael ground his teeth. Though annoyed, he tried to keep his tone calm. Since a student was injured during the exam, the best course is to annul the results and set a new test date. Hearing that, Inchial spun around and objected firmly. "We have no right to overturn the results of an exam already conducted. After all, didn't that accident stem from Hans's carelessness?" He tilted his head, eyes sharp as a blade sweeping toward Inchial. In a voice cold to the bone, "Professor Kim, it seems you care more about scores than the safety of your students." When the words ended, he fell silent, a flash of anger crossing his face. At that, Michael stood up and leisurely continued, "Let's not speak of that now." Michael strode slowly into the center of the hall. His gaze drilled into Si-hoon as if to strip away his secret. The fastest resonance speed recorded academically is 5 minutes, yet, raising his voice almost to a shout, "A freshman just stepped onto campus and can channel mana and achieve instant resonance. Do you find that plausible?" The original nature of alchemical forging is a technique developed to craft weapons purely by mana in situations where conventional forging is impossible. Therefore, the core of alchemical forging is not the traditional smithing that subjugates ore by sacrificing the forger's life, but to return to the mineral's core and awaken the latent life within it. That is the true essence of alchemical forging. In that moment, Si-hoon had only one thought. What he had just done proved that, and it's the answer smiths will discover after countless failed trials. This is a simple method that will become standard in a few years, so I have no reason to hide it. But I'm not inclined to teach a stubborn old man who only shouts and won't listen. Finally, he said coldly, "I really don't understand what nonsense you're spouting." Hearing that, Michael smirked. "Just as I suspected, you used cheating tricks." He sneered, a contemptuous, venomous laugh. "A worthless rookie, and yet you forged a rare-grade piece of equipment. If you intended to cheat, at least do something more plausible." Si-hoon frowned, his eyes darkening at the insult, but his voice restrained. "What are you talking about?" Just then, a voice cut into the tense conversation. "That's right, this is truly absurd." Michael bowed his head low, but the corner of his mouth curled up schemingly. "I knew it. You will surely understand this, headmaster. Indeed, it's ridiculous. We should strip Lee Si-hoon of his eligibility for cheating and hold a retest." Meanwhile, she calmly brushed past him. Yoonha paused before his sword. Inchial stared after her in bewilderment. "Headmaster." Yoonha carefully gripped the sword. A whisper escaped. Unbelievable. Drool could be seen dripping from Yoonha's mouth. Then suddenly she pointed at Si-hoon. "Student Lee Si-hoon." Yoonha unexpectedly made a request, eyes shining like a child finding treasure. "Let me bite off a piece." "No, just lick it. Can I taste it once?" As soon as she finished speaking, Michael was nearly speechless, his gaze showing bewilderment. Meanwhile, Inchial stared at her in astonishment. "To lick it." Suddenly, Yoonha's stomach made a gurgling sound. At the sound, the whole group almost froze. That late afternoon in the city center, Si-hoon leisurely left the academy. He stood under the blazing sunset, thinking that indeed the final tuning was still quite immature. the level of completion hadn't reached the ultimate stage. Thinking this, Sihun tried to reassure himself. Nevertheless, he smiled slightly. His hair swayed in the evening wind, his face showing unabashed delight at seeing Vice Principal Barmut trembling with anger. A passerby eyed Sihun warily and whispered to his friend, "He laughs like a pervert." His friend hurriedly urged, "He's weird, don't look at them, just keep walking." Returning his attention to Sihun, he suddenly froze. "Wait, speaking of which, Barmut, that name sounds familiar, but I can't remember where I've met him." Then Sihun wildly slapped his forehead, muttering nonstop, "Barmut, Barmut, Barmut." Images from a past life flashed back. Louise whispered angrily that back in Babel, the cheap weapons she bought after doing heavy labor under that bastard's orders suddenly exploded. Then he suddenly shouted, voice full of resentment, "That's why I was scorched by Mana and ended up in such a miserable state. Damn him, if not for that man." Across from her, Sihun looked at Louise with cold eyes. Back in the present, his steps halted as a horrifying thought flashed through Sihun's mind. The name of the smith who left the merciless Louise Valent permanently disabled was Barmut. Could Michael Barmut be that man? Thinking this, he frowned slightly. His top goal in this life was to quickly approach and reform the trio of dogs. But with the violent dog, perhaps, that was no longer necessary. Sihun curled his lips in a cold smile, his gaze turning sinister. A thought flickered in his mind. If he only stopped Michael Barmut's tyranny, Louise would never have gone astray. In an instant, the scene shifted to the refining department's conference room. Inside came shouts of anger. "Are you going to let student Sihun become our department's valedictorian?" A representative spoke, slow but laced with suspicion. Professors from other departments chimed in. "Are you serious about this decision?" Those beside him hesitated. "Even if you intend that, this seems a bit much." Yunha slowly placed both hands on the table, her calm gaze sweeping over each face. In a low yet resonant voice she asked, "Does anyone here object?" An elderly professor gently shook his head, eyes showing some reservation. In a conciliatory tone he said, "Not exactly." Before he could continue, Michael cut in. "This is more like sincere advice." He went on composedly, "After all, headmaster, you've only been in office for a short time." Hearing this, Yunha's expression shifted. It was an anger she did not bother to hide. Another person added, "Yes, we admit his equipment is impressive, but perhaps we need to reconsider more thoroughly." Inchial interjected, "Professors, you say that because you haven't seen Lee Sihun's fire-inscribed sword sheath with your own eyes. While the craftsmanship may be rough, if you look at how the mana operates and its compatibility with the five-colored flame blade." One of them could not help but exclaim, "It's astonishing, yet to be honest I'm still skeptical about its practicality." At the same time, Yunha spoke. "This weapon may only be around 60% of the completion level Lee Sihun expects. And that very imperfection demonstrates its enormous potential." She emphasized each word, "if after witnessing this." The room's atmosphere froze as Yunha slowly continued, each word falling like a hammer. "If you still cannot accept my decision regarding valedictorian Lee Sihun's upcoming demonstration, then I will immediately resign from my position as headmaster." Across the enormous square, Ludwig's voice echoed from sound-amplifying magic, long and solemn like an ancient oath. 54 years ago, the celestial realm bestowed the Tower of Heroes for the evolution of humanity. The air grew heavy as an illusion replayed, the sky cracking open. His tone turned graver. "In response, hell unleashed chaotic swamps that wrought all life, and while we found new opportunities to pursue, a great catastrophe also descended." Standing at the center of the grand hall, Ludwig lectured seriously with a rousing tone. Babel itself was formed within that turbulent current. This is the largest academy in history, built in the heart of the Pacific, and remains so to this day. Babel has trained countless outstanding heroes. Here he solemnly named an exemplar, the transcended emperor, Lord Ludwig Schubert. "And you too will become part of them." Ludwig's voice grew earnest. "Step forward, all who have set foot in the Babel Academy." His voice soared, solemn and sacred, like a battlefield oath. That is the lofty mission of a hero. The speaker was the transcended Emperor Louis Singh. Sihun stood motionless among the crowd. He quietly watched Ludwig on the dais, inwardly scheming. Seeing him up close, he seemed very kind, though in reality he was not purely a gentle old man. The MC stepped forward, raising the microphone. "Next, we will present the performances of the top students from this year's entrance exams." Invited to the stage, the top students from each department climbed the dais one after another. Sihun watched their proud backs ascend, his expression darkening as memories of a past life flickered by. "Valedictorians of departments. In my previous life, I wondered why so many act arrogant just because of academy honors." At that moment, the MC announced loudly, Now we will begin the skill demonstrations. He glanced around, forcing a wry smile. Witnessing this, it seemed he had figured out the issue. At the same time, the MC raised his voice. The demonstration's sample item today is none other than this masterpiece, ladies and gentlemen. No sooner had he finished than Automaton Model 9 appeared. The moment he saw it, he introduced it excitedly. A golem from the factory Automaton Model 9, it even possesses combat power comparable to a C-rank hero over here. Sehun's gaze locked onto Automaton Model 9. He smiled with interest. A combat-specialized automaton, then, since it's not equipped with any specific weapons, it will probably use martial arts. The MC reached toward the arena entrance. The opening act will be the representative from the combat department, his voice full of drama. The performance will be carried out by DAGGER's valedictorian, Jake Myers. Shortly after, Jake Myers and Automaton Model 9 appeared on the stage. Sehun narrowed his eyes watching the dark-haired youth step out. If it's Jake, I think he's the third son of the Myers family. Rumor says he's eccentric in his pursuit of martial arts despite being born into a family famed for swordsmanship. It seems that rumor is true. Just then the MC shouted, "Then let's begin immediately." Opposite. The automaton's eyes lit up. That was also the moment he gave the signal, "Start the match now." No sooner had he finished speaking than it pivoted its toe hard against the ground. The automaton shot toward Jake like a whirlwind. It immediately delivered a punch. Jake spun to evade at once. Meanwhile, the automaton frenziedly swung its fist at him. After a moment, Jake leapt down, toes skimming the floor. He looked up toward it. "It's my turn to show off." Saying that, Jake hesitated briefly, then lunged straight at the automaton. You could see him clench his fist. He immediately struck a punch straight into its body. Seeing that, the students were nearly stunned into silence. On the other side, Jake kept attacking the automaton madly. Sehun widened his eyes, witnessing that terrifying burst of speed. "What's going on? I distinctly remember he died young when he was an A-rank in his mid-20s. Thinking this, he couldn't help feeling unsettled. At this level, he should be the once-in-a-decade genius Babel produces. Sehun whispered in doubt to himself. Why in my past life did he only stop at A-rank? Returning to Jake, he curled his lips into a cold smile. With just this. At the last moment, he swung his arm to finish the fight with the automaton. Its head rang in the air and then fell to the ground. Jake sheathed his stance, standing upright amid the dissipating dust. He exhaled softly. "It's been a long time since I've exercised this freely." The MC's voice trembled momentarily. "Truly." Then he almost shouted with excitement. "What a spectacular and magnificent performance. Student Jake has defeated an automaton with the power of a C-rank hero in a single breath." The MC turned to Jake, unable to hide his admiration. Truly, the caliber of DAGGER's valedictorian is different. Over here, Sehun frowned slightly, thinking to himself, he really created a huge burst right from the opening. The next performer will certainly face considerable pressure. The announcer's voice rang out again, this time with a different tone, calm and dignified. Next in the program, please welcome the valedictorian of the support department. The performer will be student Inao Erica. He raised an eyebrow as the long black-haired girl stepped out. So she is valedictorian. Pressure, nothing to worry about at all. Erica, the eldest daughter of the Inao clan, one of Japan's 3 most illustrious families, was not a peak conqueror, but she built a reputation as an S-rank hero wielding a mythic-grade weapon. Yet in the end, she was corrupted into a demon and slain by her own family. At that moment, Sehun silently decided that since her future would be eroded into monstrosity, forming an alliance would bring him no benefit, and then suddenly Erica turned and looked at him. Seeing that, Sehun froze for an instant, staring at her in bewilderment. He blankly watched Erica's footsteps, his heart tangled like thread. What was that? Did she just look at me? At the same time, the MC announced sternly that the automaton used for this performance was Model 9 equipped with armor, boasting defensive capability 1.5 times that of the previous version. He shouted excitedly, the sound reverberating through the space. "Let's see what surprises student Inao Erica will bring." Then suddenly Erica produced a raven. Her eyes flashed with a demonic light as she murmured the command, "Advance." No sooner had she spoken than the raven flew straight out. It surged into the air and began circling the automaton. Taken aback by the unexpected sight, Sehun was momentarily unsettled. Just a raven. At the same time, the automaton raised its head to follow it with its gaze. Its eyes glowed with an eerie red light. Sehun watched the automaton intently. He judged inwardly that the automaton had shifted into full defensive mode. It would be very difficult to penetrate such a solid protection, especially since it belonged to the defensive line. Turning back to Erika, the corner of her mouth twitched slightly. Suddenly, the raven spread its wings wide. Its legs extended, revealing sharp talons. One of the raven's eyes also shone with a blue light. Under the sunlight, it stretched its wings. Then the raven suddenly accelerated and dove straight at the automaton. Below, the space erupted into chaos as dust and dirt flew everywhere. Seeing that scene, Si-hoon was almost stunned. On the other side, cracks appeared across the automaton's body and electrical energy surged outward. A hole had formed in its body before anyone noticed. Immediately, the automaton's torso collapsed to the ground. Seeing this, Erika beckoned and the raven returned. The MC roared once more. Amazing, truly extraordinary. With a single strike, the armored automaton was toppled. She pierced through an opponent with C-rank strength. The crowd cheered. Erika is incredible. Turning back to Si-hoon, he forced a smile. With the atmosphere so fervent, he felt he'd be booed if he merely displayed a weapon and left. At that moment, the MC shouted, and finally, the valedictorian of the Borsapa Technology Department, please welcome student Lee Si-hoon. Right then, the MC enthusiastically announced, continuing the program, we will begin the performance of Borsapa Technology's valedictorian, student Lee Si-hoon. Elsewhere, Performance Supervisor 1, Ludwig Schubert, was watching the matches on a screen. He couldn't help but chuckle softly. This cohort of valedictorians is truly impressive. How long has it been since we've seen a valedictorian from the refining department? After saying this, he felt a bit worried. Would the pressure be too great for that young man? Beside him was Performance Supervisor 2, Headmistress Ryu Yoon-ha, who firmly asserted that nothing would go wrong. The stands buzzed as Si-hoon stepped into the light. The MC smiled knowingly. Would he deliver a performance that outshone Jake and Erika? Someone sighed admiringly. He's so handsome. The MC grew curious. Is that a rare grade equipment? That's uncommon in the refining department. Female students cheered excitedly. At the same time, Si-hoon decisively drew the sword from its sheath. He swung the sword forcefully to one side, his gaze fixed on his opponent. At that moment, the image of the sword appeared behind Si-hoon along with countless functions. A male student spoke up, half admiring, half skeptical. Indeed, it's miraculous for a freshman to craft a rare grade item. The student beside him hesitated, yet compared to other departments, it still seems to lack a breakthrough. Murmurs spread as some students showed disappointment. A rare grade item that looks a bit plain, after all the previous departments already put on flashy displays. The male student felt somewhat uneasy. I don't even know what he plans to show in this performance. In a corner of the stands, Michael curled his lips, eyes glittering with ambition. Fortune has sided with me. He stared at the judging box with a predatory look. This time, the Borsapa headmaster seat will surely be mine. In contrast to Michael, Yoon-ha's face was calm as the sea. Back at the stands, the MC quickly announced to serve this performance. Model 10, with power comparable to a D-rank hero. Then he suddenly cut himself off. No. Si-hoon looked up, his eyes flashing like a blade drawn from its sheath. His words silenced the plaza. Switch to Model 8 and please equip it with armor. The MC nearly dropped the list in his hand, stammering in shock. What is he requesting? Model 8 can sometimes withstand attacks from B-rank heroes, yet he's asking for it to be fitted with armor. He hesitated for a moment. Well, that. The MC hesitated and added that it's difficult to prepare such a request on the spot. He wondered inwardly, are you trying to ruin the performance? At that moment, In-cheol spoke up. I've already arranged everything beforehand. A metallic entity suddenly appeared at his words. He glanced up toward the automaton. This automaton was now fully armored. Seeing that, the MC was momentarily stunned. He'd prepared it in advance. The MC worriedly looked around, voice faltering. If you're determined to do this, then. At the same time, Si-hoon turned to look at In-cheol. He fell silent, eyes full of expectation directed at him. From the VIP stands, the MC shouted excitedly, then go all out. He forced a smile. Now I don't even know what will happen in this match. Moments later, the MC called for the start. As soon as the battle bell rang, In-cheol tensed. In that instant, he whispered, cause some chaos. Si-hoon smirked. All right. He glanced toward the stands where In-cheol watched, a faint smile in his eyes. Perhaps I should live up to his expectations a little. The sword in his hand emanated a fierce spiritual force. Si-hoon bowed slightly, and the energy coiled into a circle. Witnessing that sight, Jake erupted in cheers. That's insane. At the same time, Hans sneered with contempt. All appearance, no real strength. What can someone lacking mana possibly accomplish? The streams of flame within the five-color flame sword inherently conflict with one another. This eruption can harm the wielder if not controlled by enormous mana. however, by exploiting the fire energy storage capability of the flame-storing scabbard. And the technique of channeling chained fire inward, Si-hoon murmured that the charging process was complete. Opposite him, the automaton had activated its barrier. Meanwhile, he swung the sword hard, igniting the flame. The move itself made the entire stance real. A thought formed in Si-hoon's mind. If I trigger the conflagration now, the flame spirits compressed inside will. His gaze fixed on the automaton's protective screen, Si-hoon whispered at the decisive moment, detonate simultaneously. In the stands, Michael's face went pale. He seemed to sense something amiss. The MC gaped in astonishment. What the hell? What is this madman planning to do? After a while, the thick dust gradually cleared. Si-hoon slowly sheathed the sword. Then he exhaled, breathing heavily. When it was over, Si-hoon scanned the slash across the arena. Had he gone a bit too far? Sensing the emergency, the MC grew urgent as the technical support team quickly assembled in the central hall. He hastily declared that with that performance, the contest was over. After a while, the click of high heels echoed throughout the grand hall. Inside, Si-hoon wore an embarrassed expression. Upon seeing him, Yoon-ha bowed slightly. I'm very sorry to have kept you waiting after calling you here. I had to help clear the wreckage in the arena. Si-hoon scratched his head awkwardly. Please don't worry, I'm the one who should apologize. I'm sorry for causing that scene in the central hall. He lowered his voice. I should have controlled my power a bit better. She blinked in surprise. What are you talking about, student Si-hoon? He asked nervously, did you call me here to scold me? Yoon-ha immediately denied it. Of course not, no. The real reason we invited you here is. Just then her stomach grumbled again. The strange noise made Si-hoon pause for a moment. She cleared her throat to hide her embarrassment. What I mean is. Finally, she made an offer. I'm willing to pay 10 times the market price. Yoon-ha looked him squarely with determination. Would you agree to transfer the 5-color flame sword and the flame-storing scabbard to me? At that, Si-hoon's eyes widened for an instant. What? At that moment, the bond with Yoon-ha was established. Yoon-ha suddenly leaned forward, speaking in a coaxing tone. It's truly a wonderful set of equipment. Suddenly, the system screen lit up before Si-hoon. A contract with the entity Ruha had been formed. The contract level with creator Si-hoon is now rank 1. He opened his eyes wide, his pupils trembling with shock so fast. In my previous life, I had to gift her weapons many times before such a bond formed. Si-hoon replied awkwardly, thank you, madam. He reassured himself inwardly that after all, this was a fortunate turn of events. Runes of mana appeared before his eyes. The system's voice echoed steadily, extracting the contract. The announcement voice grew more solemn, as if proclaiming a rare treasure. Proceeding to extract the contract from target Ryu Yoon-ha. The contract, gluttonous iron, high-grade, supreme quality, a type of iron that generates heat by consuming other metals. It corrodes any iron material it touches and absorbs the core into itself. It absorbs iron to produce mineral blood. Si-hoon stared dumbfounded at the object before him. So it's done. Just then Yoon-ha leaned forward again. You're going to sell that item to me, right? He quickly shook his head. No, sir, of course not. Hearing that, she raised an eyebrow. But you just said it's done. Suddenly a voice came from outside. Headmaster, this is Kim In-cheol. He looked up, voice clearly formal as if delivering an urgent order. The Academy headmaster announces that the award ceremony will proceed immediately. In-cheol turned to Si-hoon. May I escort student Si-hoon with me? She nodded slightly, her gaze deep and still as a nighttime lake. I understand. Si-hoon quickly stepped outside, then surreptitiously turned back. I'll see you later, sir. On this side, Yoon-ha's stomach kept crying out for attention. The place regarded as the heart of Babel Academy, the main glass-domed building, the Mardwick Manor. The scene shifted into the manor interior. Si-hoon hurriedly followed In-cheol from behind. As they walked, he lowered his voice to warn, eyes sterner than usual. Be sure to show proper decorum before the academy head. He won't just magnanimously overlook that you ruined the hall during the performance. In-cheol paused briefly, then continued. He is also someone of a completely different class from us. He smiled faintly, his expression unusually calm. You don't need to worry too much, lad. Si-hoon quickly stepped inside. Singh looked directly at the youth before him. You must be student Lee Si-hoon. The exalted emperor, headmaster Ludwig. Before I turned back time, he was the hero who sacrificed himself in a lone battle against the world-destroying demigod. One of the 6 great demigods, his deathly bearing suddenly replayed in memory. A feeling of admiration rose in him, truly a perfectionist. Ludwig then spoke, the armaments you demonstrated today are all extremely interesting. He sighed, I can't say I feel no regret, but I hold very high expectations for you. Hearing this, Si-hoon froze in place. The regret within him burned like a smoldering fire in the forge. Though prepared mentally, he still felt like throwing the five-color flame sword and the flame-storing scabbard back into the forge. Just then Ludwig made an offer. Therefore, to acknowledge your talent and effort, I will grant you 2 rewards. He asked seriously, tell me what you need. Sihun widened his eyes slightly, surprise showing for the first time on his usually composed face. 2 rewards. He answered quickly, his voice clear and without hesitation. I hope the rewards can increase my mana pool and my memory capacity. As soon as he finished speaking, Ludwig raised his arm into the air. A sigil formed in the void. Sihun stared at the 2 treasures bathed in shadow, hero-ranked, supreme quality. A shard that emitted ink-colored light falling from the night. It possessed the trait of devouring everything except darkness, with the ability to absorb mana from anything that touched the crystal. The dreamlike ivory, hero-ranked. A tusk of a species that feeds on dreams, containing dream magic capable of crossing the boundary between reality and dream, helping connect to dreams by using dream magic as a source. He wore a bewildered expression. The black cloak stone is already precious, but the dreamlike ivory is far harder to find. Sihun curled a smile. It's a bit difficult to control right now, but I already have ideas for how to use them. He studied him for a long moment. His tone softened but remained weighty. Are you satisfied with them? Sihun bowed slightly in gratitude. They really are wonderful, sir. Right after he left, a voice rang out. What are you pondering? The mirror raised a doubt. About why only that boy received 2 rewards. This action doesn't match your usual style at all. Ludwig replied over the speaker. I granted them simply because the child has the capacity to master them. Hearing the answer, it couldn't help but remark, I see, I've had the feeling he was like a premature old man. He spoke in a low voice. That only proves the boy possesses such depth that even you can perceive it. Ludwig watched Sihun's figure fade down the antique corridor. Moreover, even I cannot fully fathom the depth of that use. The scene focused on the manor called Mardwick. Inside the classroom, the group of male students kept discussing. At that moment, a student cheerfully approached. Hans, where do you want to go for lunch? He refused without hesitation. Sorry, I have plans with Senior Howard today. The student gaped in shock. A meeting with the 3rd-year top graduate of Borsippa. Hans replied nonchalantly, it's just that our families are close, so we meet often. He said he'd give me some advice about life at the academy, that's why we're meeting. The student stepped a little closer. Then, if possible, I could come along. Just then Sihun entered, casting a cold glance at Hans. The moment they saw Sihun, the whole classroom fell silent. His gaze fixed on Hans once more. He involuntarily felt a chill down his spine. What is that strange look? Seeing that, Sihun sneered. It seems he's begun to realize his place. On the other side, Hans ground his teeth in wounded pride. Damn it, must I lose to such an inferior again? The classroom door burst open as Inchial strode in decisively. His stern gaze swept the room. Everyone, settle into your seats. He glanced around the class. All right, it seems everyone is present. Inchial looked toward the class and continued. Since this is the first lesson, we'll begin with introductions. He introduced seriously. This metal bar is a material called reflective alloy. It is 10s of times more sensitive to mana than ordinary ores. Therefore, if you channel mana into it in this way. Inchial emphasized each word as he spoke. A weapon in your mind will be easily formed. At the same time, Sihun stared at him with reverence. It's no accident he's listed among the world's top 100 artisans. However, when checking the contract stone, I vaguely realized that this person truly is a genuine talent. Inchial paused a beat, his voice dropping with philosophical depth. Due to its extreme sensitivity, it's hard to use as a practical weapon, but it reflects traits from the subconscious, helping the user see themselves. He raised his voice. That's why we call equipment made from reflective alloy substitute selves. The self-introduction assignment for the smithing department will be replaced by creating these selves. At the last minute, Inchial reminded them the finished pieces would be displayed in the main building for a week, so do your best. The students answered in unison, yes, sir. Sihun's gaze lingered on a male student. He thought to himself that this piece of reflective alloy must be worth over 10 million won apiece, typical Babel luxury. Even the greetings are extravagant. At the same time, Hans flinched when he gripped the sword. Seeing that, he sighed endlessly, really. Sihun turned and sighed in frustration. There isn't a single person here with the most important talent. Just then Inchial spoke. Finally, please, Lee Sihun. He replied quickly, present, sir. Sihun thought inwardly, I'm already the top graduate of the department anyway, so there's no reason to hide my ability anymore. A bold idea suddenly occurred to him. If I'm going to do it, then. Sihoon's pupils flashed with ambitious fire. Should I go all out this time? Then suddenly, a loud explosion erupted right inside the classroom. At the same time, a male student sneered. There's really a big crowd gathering here, must be because of Lee Si-hoon's draw. He continued in a mocking, annoyed tone. It's ridiculous how they keep praising him as if he's on another level when he's only a freshman. The student beside him agreed. Exactly. The male student leaned in and nodded slightly. That's exactly what I was going to say. The two looked up toward the object as Inchial's words echoed. Although an abnormal incident occurred during the forging when it absorbed 19 nearby display alloys, we assessed that this actually demonstrated the talent of student Lee Si-hoon, so we decided to exhibit it as is. A male student scoffed lightly, his mocking voice cutting through the murmuring crowd. That's surely just a coincidence caused by some skill. The student next to him jerked his chin toward the piece with eyes full of suspicion and envy. Didn't this happen because he used too many display alloys at once? Another student interjected. It's been a long time since there's been a valedictorian from the smithing department. Maybe they're trying to market him as a true genius. Just then Erica suddenly spoke up. I have a slightly different perspective. Jake stepped forward with a sneer. I agree with her opinion. Jake's voice turned hard. It seems the amount of display alloy present still isn't enough to fully showcase Lee Si-hoon's true potential. In another development, the hammerhead came down with a heavy strike. At that moment, Si-hoon's face broke out in cold sweat. The man lowered his voice. A flash of incredulous astonishment crossed his eyes. Were you able to time that? Until now, there hasn't even been an error as small as 0.01 seconds. Assistant Ha stared at him in bewilderment. What else can we possibly teach such an outstanding child? He gave a small smile, then let's skip his part and be done with it, he signaled. Does anyone want to see a demonstration? After a while, Assistant Ha announced, all right, class dismissed. On this side, Si-hoon's eyes remained fixed on the hammer. Then he stared intently at the metal fragments under the table. Without hesitation, Si-hoon raised the hammer once more. Assistant Ha suddenly spoke up. Are you planning to smash it? He stopped, bowed politely, and greeted the teaching assistant. He stepped closer and reminded him, we need to hand these items in after this smithing class week, so don't damage them. Si-hoon tilted his head slightly. We have to hand them in? Assistant Ha wore an exasperated look. Where do you think students would get the operating budget? Babel provides support based on performance, specifically the number of weapons sold on the open market. He pondered for a moment, then asked, so exactly what are you dissatisfied with right now? Is it your physical condition or your mana reserves? Taken aback by the question, Si-hoon let out a soft laugh. The biggest problem at the moment is my body. At that moment, a complex thought arose. To craft the training tools, I need to forge the Max Stone, but I lack the endurance to perform that work. The assistant tilted his head, his tone suggestive as if offering a tempting shortcut, if it's truly necessary for the forging. After a moment's thought, he proposed, wouldn't using enhancement talismans be faster than physical training? Hearing that, Si-hoon couldn't help but laugh. I never even considered that option. I always avoided it before I traveled back in time. The corner of Si-hoon's mouth lifted as if he'd found a new path. Since I returned to the past and currently have stamina issues, I can certainly forge the Max Stone while under the effect of enhancement talismans. He bowed his head slightly. Thank you very much for the useful advice. Assistant Ha shook his head gently. It's nothing. Then Si-hoon looked up, his gaze dropping to the sword in his hands as he carried out the casting. He didn't forget to warn him that he was using too much mana. Lower it to about 70% of the current level and concentrate your strike on a single point. Before leaving, Si-hoon affirmed confidently that doing so would yield better results for him right now. Hearing this, the man forced a smile. A freshman just corrected the teaching assistant. Then Assistant Ha turned and looked toward the hammer. At that moment, the sky grew increasingly heated. Babel always encourages proactive self-study by each individual student. The system's voice chimed, the doors began to open, and the lecturer's announcements continued to stream in. You have the right to enroll in courses from other departments or even take dozens of classes in a single semester. However, you must complete all your major courses, and if you accumulate 3 failing grades, you will be expelled immediately. Everything is completely free, but you must be responsible for your choices. The announcement crackled. Next stop, the area for the magic department. At that moment, Si-hoon casually stepped off the tram. As he looked up, Erica suddenly appeared. A male student blocked his path, his voice provocative. Hey, don't stand in the way, move aside. Si-hoon frowned. Who are these guys coming out of nowhere to pick a fight? He said loudly, you people are the ones who should move aside. Hearing that, the male student's body trembled with anger as Erica stepped in close. She asked curiously, where are you headed? Taken aback by Erica's sudden action, the male student froze. Miss Erica, Si-hoon answered honestly, to the magic department. I was wondering if there are any elective courses I could register for. Seeing this, she decisively offered, then let me show you the way. He hurriedly interjected, Miss Erica, the meeting is about to start. She curtly replied, you all go on without me. The male student appeared anxious, but the seniors insisted they really wanted you to be there. Erica glanced over coldly, her voice calm but leaving no room for protest. I'm not interested. Turning back to Sihoon, his gaze showed no wavering. Then the two quickly walked away, ignoring the male students shouted, Miss Erica, and as the space grew quiet, Erica turned to him, her expression noticeably more serious. Precisely what kind of elective are you looking for? Sihoon answered slowly, I'm trying to learn more about enhancement talismans. She pressed further. Specifically, what kind of enhancement effect? He replied calmly, something that can boost physical ability but must not interfere with the forging process. Hearing this, Erica suggested, then try barrier techniques. Sihoon froze. Barrier techniques, aren't those spells typically used only for defense? She explained slowly, they can vary widely depending on how you apply them. Erica pulled a thin sheet of paper from her pocket. She signaled, I'll give an example, and held the paper out toward him. Try tearing this paper, she said. Sihoon took it and felt a thin layer of mana coating the surface. Momentarily surprised, he wondered if she had just increased its durability. No, not exactly. It retained its original properties but would automatically become much stiffer when struck by a strong external force. Sihoon stared at the scrap and analyzed that this technique was highly suitable for smithing work because it required extremely precise control. Erica gave a faint laugh. For complex applications like this, you'll probably need a professor's help. He looked at the paper blankly, a doubt arising. Hey, this spell formula looks very familiar. Meanwhile, she kept talking. The professor who teaches barrier construction married someone from a branch of my family. So I can introduce you to him directly if you want, Erica added, raising her voice slightly as a lead-in. Then suddenly Sihoon exclaimed, that's it, and the paper was torn instantly. At the sight, she couldn't help but feel a little unnerved. You were able to grasp my family's barrier technique in such a short time and even dispel it. It was morning at University's magic department. Sihoon's presence beside her in the campus center stunned everyone, making them the focus of curious stares and non-stop whispers. Why is Erica with a guy from another department? I think I saw them together yesterday too. If I'm not mistaken, they appeared together at the exhibition, people murmured. Amid all the gathered looks and whispers across campus, he could only sigh helplessly. False rumors spread fast. Why do people always poke into others' business? Ridiculous. If Erica truly had feelings for me, there would already be a bond between us. Anyway, who knows what criteria they used to select students for the class? I registered for this class, but they require an entrance test first. Erica immediately announced the location. This is where the test on barrier structure will take place. Sihoon began to glance around and asked doubtfully, this forest. The other examinees kept cursing in frustration. Damn it, what backwater area is this located in? He silently observed the forest before them and thought to himself, are we playing a treasure hunt to take this exam? This is getting annoying. Did they use a barrier to hide something or? Sihoon accidentally stomped on a strange spot, and the barrier surrounding the forest immediately shattered. As the barrier broke beneath Sihoon's feet, the teaching assistant appeared at once and announced crisply, you've passed the test. He was so shocked he could only blurt out in astonishment. What? Robert looked up at the teaching assistant standing by the desk with a puzzled expression. That young lady actually showed interest in the top graduate of our department. Professor Robert Perry, specialist in barrier structure at magic department. He held his phone up to him and replied, yes, take a look at this list. He glanced at the list on the assistant's phone and remarked skeptically, I'm also surprised she suddenly applied for such a basic class. Thanks to that draw, the number of applicants tripled, but I don't find it pleasing at all, especially since there was also a request from the Inao heir. So this year we've added a test using the Lost Soul Maze. The Lost Soul Maze is a barrier that disrupts the senses and leaves people disoriented. Although it's only a basic barrier, someone completely ignorant of magic wouldn't even notice its presence. Witnessing the scene, Robert fell silent in astonishment, inwardly marveling as he realized the student's true ability. Even without the young lady's hand to help, he could still break that maze purely by instinct. He announced clearly to the crowd, all of you here have passed the first round. From now on, we'll sort the class by a second test. A student raised his hand confidently. May I go first? The student secretly calculated that this was a golden opportunity to make an impression on Erica. Robert nodded in agreement. Very well. The second test is simple. Use your mana to dismantle the activated barrier before you. I'll evaluate based on completion time, so be fast and precise. The contest began, a barrier woven like a spiderweb with a spider at its center acting as the nucleus. This spider will continually dodge whenever it senses mana moving along the threads, and as long as it survives, the network will keep regenerating itself. Facing the barrier, the volunteer suddenly froze, mentally calculating intention that his mana was insufficient to encircle the entire magical structure in the usual way. If that's the case, I'll overwhelm it with speed. He glanced at his watch and said sternly, 2 minutes 23 seconds. You need to focus more on understanding the barrier's structure, though this result isn't bad. The student cast a quick glance at the young lady hopping for encouragement, but Erica's face remained expressionless, as calm as a windless lake, leaving the student to bow his head in disappointment. Thank you, Professor. Then Robert gave a decisive command. Next person, hurry up after everyone has tried. He helplessly declared that all of you will start from the basic class. Next is Erica and Al's turn. You may begin. She stepped forward with an unusually composed air. Erica simply lifted a finger to touch the barrier. The entire barrier flared and shattered into 100 pieces in an instant, leaving the space utterly still. The students' faces around her were stunned with amazement, then whispers rose like waves. How could it be so astonishingly fast? She had dissected the entire formula and caused the barrier to collapse completely. Truly, the caliber of a valedictorian is different amid the lingering praise. He walked over slowly. Robert glanced at the stopwatch and said coldly, 22 seconds, very good, but if you had used the standard dismantling method, it would have been 2 seconds faster. Unfazed by Robert's strictness, Erica bowed slightly and replied calmly, I will remember that. He said nothing further. His sharp eyes flicked to the next contestant as a tacit warning of his high standards. Then he clearly called the name. Last is Lee Si-hoon. Judging by how Si-hoon stepped out, Robert assessed inwardly that there was nothing remarkable about him. Let's see what his true ability is. Instead of hastily casting magic or performing elaborate preparations, he casually sat down right in front of the barrier. The students' whispering grew louder. What on earth is he doing? Doesn't he know the test is time? Si-hoon remained calm, his gaze steady as he carefully peeled apart each layer of the energy shield structure. This barrier had properties very similar to forged stone. A capacity to self-repair and return to its original state unless the impact reached a certain threshold. Therefore, to forge such a stone, a smith must deliver all pulses at the same moment with precise ratios. Robert finally lost patience and strode over to demand, what exactly are you trying to pull off? Listen to me first, her voice cut in, leave him be, at Erica's authoritative request. He could only fall silent helplessly. Robert said no more, pressed his lips together and stepped back. In the absolute silence, Si-hoon's mind worked at maximum speed. So if I do this, can I retain the pulses accumulated inside the stone, instead of it shattering or dissipating as usual? The moment his finger touched the weak point, the entire barrier erupted violently. Amid the thick atmosphere of astonishment, Si-hoon spoke in an ordinary voice, nonchalant as if he had just finished a trivial chore. Done. Just like that, he thought to himself that he could forge the forged stone now, and Si-hoon stood up. He walked over the wreckage with an indifferent air, as if its existence had never mattered. With the barrier gone, he rose decisively and walked off, ignoring everyone's stares. The teaching assistant looked at the clock and announced, the time is 7 minutes 45 seconds. Robert watched Si-hoon's retreating back in silence. He thought to himself that how long the boy took didn't really matter. This time it might have been 7 minutes, but next time facing a similar barrier, he'd destroy it in the blink of an eye. He hadn't simply broken the barrier. He had devised a formula himself to neutralize that spell. She watched his lone figure go, her gaze full of worry. Erica thought inwardly that if his miraculous smithing skills were combined with magic, she truly feared what terrible artifacts he might create. A letter arrived notifying, we have received an application for intermediate forging using hero grade or higher materials from first-year student Lee Si-hoon. Per Article 8 of the Forge Safety Regulations, anyone wishing to supervise should please contact us. The instructor looked at the computer screen and wondered how many people would come this time. Suddenly messages began flooding in, surprising him. Wow, people are quick to respond. However, not a single person from Vice Principal Michael's faction applied. Rumor had it the atmosphere there was tense because his son had been demoted to second rank. So the rumor was true. The instructor began to calculate. Then I should start selecting people, he thought, eyes wide in amazement. Reading the message that the headmistress would personally supervise Lee Si-hoon's intermediate forging. Suddenly Yuha appeared and called out, long time no see, student Lee Si-hoon. He froze, shocked inwardly. She is so busy yet comes here in person. she replied calmly in her capacity as headmistress. I came to verify your abilities with my own eyes. Si-hoon did not look directly at Yoon-ha but only replied softly, if things have come to this, then I must devote all my effort to the crafting. With that, he immediately began forging on the spot, the first step in forging forged stone. In fact, there are many methods to handle this stone, but the most difficult technique among them is the night process. You must place the stone in a space completely devoid of light and use mana to separate impurities from the ink-like stone that spreads like water. In this step, a small mistake in mana control will cause the stone to immediately solidify and become useless. It sounds simple, but in reality it's akin to restructuring matter itself. She remained utterly silent, observing each of Si-hoon's movements. While his hands moved rhythmically, Si-hoon's mind began calculating coldly. 1/4 is the best limit I can reach, is it? If I reduce it any further, its performance won't be sufficient. In the second step, he began to conjure a blazing red flame directly from his palm. That tremendous heat enveloped the middle block, causing the surrounding space to twist with each breath Si-hoon took. He channeled mana through the deep red flame to filter out the appropriate portion of firepower. This stabilized flame is called the roaming wildfire, and it has the property of maintaining the exact temperature it had the moment it was formed. The third step uses a hammer wrapped in roaming wildfire to strike the heavy ink stone. The key is not to pause until the deformation lessens thanks to the flame's properties. Watching the blazing flame, Yoon-ha mused that even if he is immune to fire, it doesn't mean he feels no pain. How much has he worn himself down? He swung the hammer repeatedly with a strangely fervent zeal. As the hammer's strikes echoed throughout the forge, Erica stood quietly in a secluded corner of the campus waiting for Si-hoon. Regardless of Si-hoon's self-forgetting fervor, she stood nearby looking rather unenthused. Yoon-ha kept yawning short, sleepy breaths. She stood there with a tired, listless expression. 4 hours of training had passed. The properties of the ink stone, after absorbing the flame to its limit, were beginning to change. He exhaled in relief, thinking it's done, the deformation has stopped. Melt the treated inkstone block. Then pour it into the mold prepared beforehand. The fatigue and gloom on Yoon-ha's face vanished instantly, replaced by a look of astonishment. She thought, casting, not forging. The attributes will change because of the darkness deep within the mold. What on earth is he thinking? As Si-hoon was about to begin the fourth step, Yoon-ha suddenly intervened. Wait. Despite her stern warning, he did not stop. In Si-hoon's head, there were only numbers and magical structures, gradually slowing the transformations in the ink stone with a formula that broke the barrier, and constructing a mana circuit within that brief time. Just as the mana circuit took shape during the ink stone's fleeting transformation, everything abruptly fell silent, revealing in Si-hoon's hands the final product, an ink spider bracelet of deep, somber black. The moment the bracelet finished forming, a mechanical chime rang, shattering the stillness. The system notification suddenly appeared before him. Permanent item, ink spider bracelet completed. To break prejudices, a bold challenge that spares no one is necessary. Though the material's potential hasn't been fully tapped, the smith's forging skill to create new capabilities deserves top rank. You have acquired the skill Black Soul Thread, Ink Spider Bracelet Rare, Average Quality. A bracelet crafted by forging heavy ink stone. It possesses the property of absorbing the wearer's mana, and its weight increases corresponding to the amount of mana absorbed and stored. The wearer can use the ring's burst skill. In the dead silence, Si-hoon let out a quiet breath and said, succeeded. In the hush, Yoon-ha's hungry stomach made a loud, unmistakable rumble as if announcing itself to the world. He froze and glanced with a puzzled look, while she blushed and hurriedly covered her stomach with her hand as if to hide her body's betrayal. Si-hoon could only look up at the sky and sigh helplessly, as if witnessing a legend collapse before his eyes. Yoon-ha examined it and offered her subjective view. Could this be a resonance phenomenon? It's impressive, looks simple at first glance. However, its power is not overly formidable. If done correctly, we could aim to create a set effect. Still keeping a composed air, he calmly presented the item before her and said, I'm sorry I can't offer you a weapon when you're troubled because of me. I don't know if this will help, more like a snack to soothe the palate, but at least please accept it. Si-hoon said nothing further, holding his position and looking toward Yoon-ha. She took the item from Si-hoon and unexpectedly activated her unique skill, the Soul Forge. Yoon-ha tasted it lightly and immediately remarked, this is quite tasty. He blurted out, really? She replied matter-of-factly, yes, figuratively speaking, it tastes like crunchy fried scraps. Si-hoon thought inwardly with relief. Have I developed a habit of making everything to Yoon-ha's taste? Perhaps it'll be easy to deepen my bond with her. He smiled faintly at Yunha and gently said, "I'm glad you like it." She nodded approvingly and said of course, though she felt a little regret eating this while those other items were laid out before her. "By the way, when do you plan to deal with the 5-colored blade and the ignite sheet?" Sihun shook his head slightly, his gaze maintaining its characteristic calm as he answered, "I don't intend to sell them right now." Yunha paused, puzzled and a bit anxious, and pressed, "Sorry, what do you mean? Are the prices not high enough?" He replied calmly, "I'll keep them to prepare for the conquest class." Sihun smiled faintly and thought, furthermore, there's a saying that hunger is the best spice. He nodded slightly as if promising, then said, "Once I obtain equipment worthy of giving to you, I'll let you know first." She blushed, brushed off her awkwardness to regain composure, and said, "I'll be eagerly awaiting that." "Is the forging really finished then?" He answered yes, and Yunha promptly reminded him. "Then let's go, the staff will come clean up." Sihun rasped out, "Thankfully, because I have no strength left to tidy up." As they were walking, he suddenly felt dizzy and fell backward. She alarmedly caught Sihun. Yunha asked anxiously, "Are you okay?" He composed himself and replied, "Ah yes, I'm fine. Perhaps I misallocated my stamina a bit." She offered to carry him back to the dormitory, or asked, "Are you afraid of heights?" Sihun answered decisively no. Immediately Yunha lifted him effortlessly in a princess carry, catching him off guard. She took a running step. Yunha launched forward like a lightning bolt through the air. While still carrying him, Yunha circulated mana and thought inwardly, could the mold I just absorbed really extract so much power? As she carried him and shot through the air at terrifying speed, Sihun could only give in helplessly and thought that in many respects the current situation had changed a great deal compared to before I returned to the past. At that time, Erika was still patiently standing on the campus grounds waiting for him. "Lee Sihun still hasn't shown up. I need to deliver this invitation to him." On the Metallurgy Department's free forum at Babel Academy, an anonymous user posted a photo of Erika and asked the question, "Why is she appearing here? Isn't she the Combat Department's top entrance student?" A flurry of comments followed. One person said she stood motionless in front of the metallurgy building for 3 hours, prompting many replies asking, is she waiting for Borsipa's top student? Last time someone saw her waiting for him at the dormitory, was it really just that simple? If so, just call him and tell him to come down. Sihun had seen these things too and helplessly wondered what this was all about. He reassured himself, whatever important matter it is, they'll surely seek me out again. Just then the classroom door opened. A middle-aged man entered and introduced himself. "Pleased to meet you all. From today I'll be teaching tool comprehension. My name is Ricaros Miles." He slapped the door to get everyone's attention and ordered, "First, everyone move to the training center. Whoever arrives last will be punished with 20 laps around the stadium. Begin." As soon as Ricardo's finished speaking, the students sprang up and ran off. "Why are we suddenly made to run like this?" Sihun tensed amid the crowd. Wasn't this supposed to be a theory class? They kept chattering, "I don't know either, just run already." In the end, the whole group arrived at the place. Sihun was punished by Ricaros and ordered to run the full 20 laps. He calmly ran while replying, "Yes, I'm running here." The people around kept murmuring, "This guy's stamina is hopelessly low. I wonder if he really completed the intermediate forging test well." After a while, Ricaros stepped forward and called, "Everyone, pay attention." He explained seriously, originally tool comprehension was designed to teach the theory of equipment construction, but due to recent hunts for fire swords, we must change our training methods. There have been attacks targeting smiths capable of crafting fire swords of hero rank and above. Those attackers are called fire sword hunters. Running and listening, Sihun thought to himself that even before he reversed time, it was still an unsolved case. He continued that however strong your defensive systems, ultimately the only thing that protects you is your own body. Then Ricaros raised his voice to instruct. Therefore, alongside studying tools in this class, you will also be taught skills to protect yourselves. The students replied in unison, "Yes, teacher." Ricaros, pleased, said, "Good, today's lesson will be about swords." Sihun kept reminding himself he needed to be a bit more cautious this time. His feet kept moving. To do that, the top priority is to improve his own physical strength. Sihun's hand tightened as he assessed inwardly that although he made it himself, its effect was indeed extremely good. The system displayed information. This bracelet is cast from inkstone and can absorb the wearer's mana to increase its weight accordingly. It will store and draw the owner's mana, allowing activation of the circle burst skill, which controls gravity within 1 meter around the user. Seeing the stat panel, he set goals for himself. The basic stats had each increased by about 5 points on average. Before the end of freshman year, he must make this body strong at any cost. After a while, Ricaros turned and called Sihun, "Stop running and come here quickly." He glanced down at his hand, the burst ring. He privately assessed Sihun. His condition seemed better than I thought. Then Rikaros held the sword out toward him and suggested to see if he had an aptitude for swordsmanship. Try swinging this blade. Sihun took it and observed for a moment. Movement might be a bit hindered by the ink spider bracelet. He hesitated inwardly. It's not a formally trained technique, but should I try to apply that move? Finally, Sihun made up his mind and swung the sword down. The students outside burst out laughing and mocked him as too slow, probably exhausted after the run. Yet his striking stance didn't look that bad. But Rikaros had a completely different evaluation. Not at all, it was truly excellent. Your sword path seems to have clearly formed the direction it needs to follow. He turned and remarked, however the tempo is still too hasty. You should correct that before proceeding. For a moment Sihun's gaze sharpened. Rikaros' whole body seemed to tremble. The space seemed to pale to white within his sight. Rikaros' eyes froze. He looked bewildered at the sword pressed against his throat. Rikaros wondered inwardly, could he have just felt fear toward a technical student so strongly that it produced such a terrifying hallucination? Then he hesitantly asked who had taught the student that sword style. Sihun smiled faintly, but inside he was completely confused. Why did that move work? He had said it was just a technique improvised in 10 minutes. Sihun recalled old memories. Guangsu scratched his ear and said, "Look, I told you I'd repay you next time. People sometimes fall on hard times, so why are you panicking?" He kept begging, "Can I pay with a technique instead of money? I'll teach you that technique, so please stop and help." Back in the present, Sihun awkwardly scratched his head and lied, "I'm just someone who often watches videos of other heroes' battles." Rikaros didn't believe him but still smiled and asked if he truly wanted formal sword training. He offered, "I'll prepare a recommendation letter for you to join the body control class at Akkarquip." That afternoon at the Akkarquip Center, Sihun stood dazed among the crowd. Ma Guangsu stomped his foot in anger. "How many times have I told you I have nothing left to teach you?" Yet Jake wouldn't listen. "Please, sir, don't treat me like that." He was a retired S-rank hero and also a regular client, Ma Guangsu, known as the Swordbreaker. Sihun could hardly believe that this drunkard and gambling addict was a professor. On seeing Guangsu appear, someone asked, "Who are you?" Sihun produced the letter and introduced himself. "I'm Lee Sihun, a first-year metallurgy student, referred here by Professor Rikaros." He asked in surprise, "Rikaros recommended you?" Jake also scrambled up to explain that kid is this year's top Borsapa entrant. He bluntly evaluated that no matter how you look at him, he seems utterly ordinary. Then Guangsu asked, "Do you truly long to learn from me?" The boy eagerly affirmed, "Yes, I do." He pointed at Sihun and said then, "If you can defeat that brat, I'll agree to take you on." He arranged a match for the two, just one round. Whoever lands a valid hit first wins. Guangsu waved his hand to signal the match begin. As soon as his voice ended, Jake lunged forward quickly. Sihun remained standing in place, gripping the sword tightly. Guangsu doubted inwardly whether relaxing to maximize flexibility by nullifying muscle power was the right approach. If so, the basic counter would be grappling rather than direct strikes. Meanwhile, Jake swung his arm in an attack. Guangsu sighed irritably. "That's exactly why I hate show-offs who only try to outthink instead of properly engaging. It's not fun at all. What a letdown." Immediately, Jake charged and grabbed at Sihun's stomach. He grit his teeth in sudden pain. What demonic strength is this? Then Sihun told himself, but he activated the circle burst skill. Power erupted from it in a blinding flash. Sihun succeeded in turning the tide. He hissed in pain briefly. Sihun's fist was right in front of his opponent's face. Blood also dripped from his nose. He smiled slightly at the sight and asked, "Looks like I was a bit faster this time, right?" The space quickly fell silent. After a moment, Jack finally spoke. "That attack just now was really..." Before he could finish, Guangsu ordered everyone to disperse at once. "Remember, I promised to teach only if he won." Hearing that, Sihun sat up and protested, "Since he lost to me, shouldn't you be the one to teach me, sir?" He taunted, "What a joke, who would have thought Akkarquip's top student would be defeated by a Borsapa trainee?" Just hearing it is pathetic. Jake stood there stunned. Pathetic, why? Seeing this, Guangsu agreed, "That's fair, perhaps we should whip this fool into shape so he can fend for himself." He turned excitedly and exclaimed. Then he told him he'd arrange a time and send it to him. "Be punctual when it comes." This made Jake extremely happy. He bowed deeply and said, "Thank you very much, teacher." Guangsu sighed irritably and waved, "Once I'm done you may leave." Then he turned to Sihun and said, "I still have some private matters to discuss with this kid." After the room thinned to just the two of them, Guangsu asked him to demonstrate again the sword technique he used against Rikaros. Si-hoon quickly replied, I understand. Si-hoon looked at him tensely. Then he lunged forward with the sharp blade in his hand. However, in an instant, Si-hoon's sword was knocked aside by Gwangsu. He stood stunned as Gwangsu commented, this is a move meant to finish an opponent at first sight. Gwangsu coldly asserted the idea is decent, but the execution is crude. Do you think it's normal for a sword technique to reveal its weakness on the second use? He angrily warned that if anyone dared teach this and praised it, he'd break their hands and feet, though Gwangsu didn't know he was the one who had taught it. Gwangsu sighed and said, wait and see. I will build a complete body around this shaky technical framework of yours. Si-hoon nonchalantly asked, so that means I'm officially enrolled in the class, right? Gwangsu, puzzled, confirmed, of course that's right. He felt reassured and took his leave, then said, I'll be going now. After Si-hoon left, Gwangsu glanced at him and mused, the kid is rigid indeed. Outside, Si-hoon sighed in annoyance. It's as if they're treating me like some noble when it's just post-sale service. Just then Jake stepped forward and greeted, hey you there. He replied in surprise, you're still here. Then pulled out a letter and said, I have something I'd like to give you. Si-hoon blinked and asked, what's this? He explained it was an invitation to join Noblesse, a gathering of trainees from prestigious families. Si-hoon realized perhaps Erica intended to give this to him earlier. Jake said excitedly, there are a lot of snobs there, but I think it's a good opportunity for you. Yet Si-hoon hesitated, unsure if he should casually accept something like this. He beamed and said, thanks to you I got into that class, so I at least owe you my gratitude. Seeing that, Si-hoon smiled back and said thanks. A while later on the way, he quietly evaluated the electives he'd registered so far, barrier structure and body control. He also wanted to try an elective from Borsippa. Right now, he was torn between alchemical curse techniques and augmentation. Distracted, he accidentally bumped into someone. Si-hoon froze and began, sorry, may I ask? His gaze suddenly halted. It turned out a girl had grabbed his wrist to inspect it. Is this something you made yourself? Si-hoon bluntly replied, so what if I did make it? Then she offered, or would you like me to augment it for you? The system quickly displayed a notice. A link with the target named Lee Claudel has been successfully established. Lee Claudel is someone capable of upgrading equipment by up to 2 ranks through augmentation. A genius among geniuses who forged legendary gear. The one dubbed the person who revolutionized the augmentation industry. Lee exclaimed in surprise, inkstone and its rare grade. She kept experimenting, if I just add a few formulas here. No, it's too wonderful to stop at this level. Then Lee, exhausted, held her head. No, how do I solve this dilemma? Watching that, Si-hoon silently judged she was unexpectedly peculiar. Then he casually asked, is this equipment not good? Lee quickly explained the problem. It's that there are too many things I want to do to it. It's forged from inkstone, so why is the compatibility unbelievably high? There are too many formulas I could apply, so I can't decide. Hearing that, Si-hoon set something on the table and said, if that's the case, it should be fine. Seeing her bewildered, he reminded her, there's more. Look. Si-hoon carefully advised, moreover it has resonance effects, so pay attention to that. Lee asked excitedly, where are you from? He nonchalantly introduced himself. I'm Lee Si-hoon, a first-year metallurgy student and this year's top Borsippa entrant. She was amazed and exclaimed, a first year? Incredible, I'm a third-year augmentation student. Just then someone stepped in and cut their conversation off. I have something to discuss, come with me for a moment. Si-hoon quickly recognized Erica's lackey. Lee stood up irritated and snapped, can't you see we're talking here? The guy finally lowered his tone and said, I want to resolve this peacefully, so please give me a few minutes. Si-hoon coldly replied, say it plainly here. So he sighed and urged, apologize for your rude attitude toward Miss Erica. You tore up the invitation she handed you in front of so many people. Si-hoon said in confusion, but that lady herself told me to tear it up. His eyes immediately turned furious as he snapped, sure, you have your reasons, but you shouldn't have accepted the invitation from the Myers family. Si-hoon asked irritably, did Erica send you here? He hurriedly denied it. No. This was entirely my own idea. At that moment, Lee laughed mockingly, right, believable. She bluntly exposed him, does anyone not know you're the right-hand man of the young master? This made him angry. How dare a worthless guy like you? Maybe you're deluding yourself into thinking you're someone special. He criticized Si-hoon, saying Babel isn't short on geniuses far above your level. However, Si-hoon paid it no mind and asked, did you mean that to imply yourself? Si-hoon's words struck him like a thunderbolt. The enraged man shouted, shut up. Si-hoon watched the man's power flare, but calmly reached out his hand. With one hand, he could hold back the pack of phantom beasts charging at him. A surge of mana suddenly dissipated, and he remarked, just as I predicted, that wasn't created purely from mana. You used the sword array as a medium to attack even though they were only illusions. emotions. This made him stammer in fear. How could you possibly do that? Sihun nonchalantly twirled the weapon in his hand and replied, who knows? He laughed excitedly and said it sounds pretty delicious. At the same time, the system announced the greedy Iron Link imprint had been officially activated. The guy despaired, crying out, my 1 million is ruined. Sihun smirked with a flavor this exquisite. No wonder you went crazy for it. The system displayed Link information. Ryu Yunha, greedy iron of supreme high quality. An iron that generates heat by devouring other iron. It corrodes metal on contact and absorbs their cores into itself, hunting and consuming iron to produce mineral blood. Remaining durability 78%. A circle burst and in an instant Sihun lunged forward. He punched the man straight in the gut, which sent the man collapsing to his knees on the spot. Sihun turned and called to Lee, so then senior. He glanced at her and asked, is there any lecture in the augmentation department you think would be worth recommending to me? Lee's face suddenly flushed and she began to speak. Ancient augmentation, there's also an extremely outstanding senior there named Lee Claudel. After departing, the man clutched his stomach in pain, damn it. He kept grumbling that he couldn't believe a freshman possessed such incredible reflexes. Just then Erica appeared ahead and said, excuse me, I'd like to borrow that sword array to examine it a bit. The man jumped and shouted, Miss Erica, when did you arrive here? Then the lackey respectfully handed it back to her. Here, it's here, miss. Erica looked at the sword and warned, you don't need to report this to my brother. As for the family head, I'll speak to him privately later. He awkwardly scratched his head and replied, yes, I understand. Erica silently assessed, indeed it's a conduit-type item. It has an anti-theft seal carved on it. She felt a little unsettled inside. Could he have independently created a counterattack skill based on his magic and Professor Robert's teachings? Erica began to feel uncertain. Lee Si-hoon, his forging talent may even surpass S-rank. I must adjust my assessment of his mana compatibility up to grade A. The system suddenly appeared. A link with the entity named Erica and now has been established. This made Si-hoon uneasy. What is happening? He began to wonder whether she had been secretly watching when he fought that lackey. Si-hoon held the blades in his hands, resigned. At least he'd received fair compensation. He was still short by 10 blades though, left as is it's a bit crude, but combined with a black spirit thread it would work well. He yawned and complained, anyway, putting that aside, I had been really looking forward to Professor Kim In-cheol's class, yet today I only had to listen to tedious theory I already knew by heart. Shortly after, In-chin spoke seriously. That explanation is enough, now let's begin the main portion. He picked up the item on the table and explained that even if you use the exact same metal, its shape will change completely depending on how you arrange the mana. A stone suddenly appeared as In-cheol spoke. The applicability of this metal deformation technique is what determines a weapon's versatility. He placed different stones on the table. In-cheol transformed them back into their original iron ingots and affirmed that therefore, if you choose the path of a blacksmith, you must master the intrinsic potential of the metal you work with. In-cheol posed the task. Today in class we will practice deformation techniques on these iron ingots. He had someone distribute the stones and gave the instruction. First, use a mana flow to create a scratch about 3 cm deep at the center of the ingot. These items are tuned to be extremely sensitive to deformation, so work carefully. Si-hoon silently noted that perhaps the professor did not completely reject magical forging methods after all. In-cheol announced crisply, your time limit is 10 minutes, you may begin now. The students were bewildered, clutching their ingots and complaining why this happened to them, that it wouldn't return to its original shape. At that moment 2 people stepped forward. Si-hoon said indifferently, I'm finished. Hands glanced at him and reported, I'm done, sir. In-cheol praised approvingly, good, you 2 may move on to the next training stage. Then he introduced another task. We will attempt a different arrangement pattern. Give it a try and apply it accordingly. Hands looked at Si-hoon confidently. Their speed and level of finish were on par. This time I'm definitely going to win. In-cheol continued explaining, next will be the arrangement according to this diagram. He hurriedly executed it with sky-high confidence. His moment had arrived. Hands thought happily that he would complete it perfectly and impress everyone. But after he finished, In-cheol requested, Hands Barmut, try returning that ingot to its original state. Hands instantly froze and asked, sir, what did you say? Only when asked to try did he become flustered. Why did it turn out like this? Hans helplessly realized the arrangement of mana flows had been completely destroyed. Seeing this, Inchial spoke up. That ingot could not withstand the deformation you performed. In other words, that proves your handling was flawed from the very first step. He asked again in confusion, but you clearly followed the professor's instructions exactly. He lowered his head and explained that what he had emphasized earlier was that you must fully comprehend the inherent potential of the metal. Inchial continued to criticize. If you cannot restore the affected mana structure, it is no longer deformation but a severe degradation of the equipment. It becomes a major variable that affects quality and performance, so you must study this carefully. Hans bowed his head and replied he would remember the teacher's words. Then he glanced at Si-hoon, wondering if that guy truly grasped the key point. In the end, he concluded no, maybe the boy just got lucky while spacing out. However, immediately after, Si-hoon succeeded. It really worked. He restored the ingot to its original state. This left the students unsettled. Didn't the teacher just say that method was impossible? It can't be. Inchial was also embarrassed. Student Lee Si-hoon, could you please demonstrate that deformation technique for me once more? Si-hoon thought helplessly that he'd accidentally given the professor the wrong impression. He awkwardly explained that this worked only because the iron had been specially tuned for students. An ordinary standard ingot would never respond that way. Seeing how things had played out, Inchial realized the truth. It worked thanks to the heightened sensitivity of the specially adjusted ingot. He brooded, surprised that he himself had overlooked that crucial detail. A conqueror of the heights in the greatest blacksmith, Saint of Flame Lee Kent's, he created it during his years as an S-rank hero, and decades later. No one has been able to refute it. The deformation formula is regarded as the core truth of all blacksmiths, the doctrine of iron and steel. Thinking that, Inchial hesitated. Surely the boy couldn't have found another way, could he? Should I believe this is possible for him? Si-hoon turned away, thinking if the professor recognizes it again this time, that would be 2 times in a row. Outside, the sky was darkening. Inchial announced, the lesson ends here, you may take a break. He stopped and asked, student Lee Si-hoon, could you stay a moment? Si-hoon replied, yes professor, is something the matter? Inchial took out an item and said, this is a gift to celebrate your enrollment because you helped me so much with the move to Babel. The system displayed information. Bloodfire Ember, rare high-quality ore that contains the essence of deep crimson flame. It has a special ability to melt mixed ores into liquid form. Si-hoon hesitated and asked what it was. Inchial replied that if he could absorb the essence from this ember, he would permanently strengthen his deep crimson flame. I prepared it because I heard you can control bloodfire. He happily nodded and said, thank you, Professor. This gift will be an enormous help to me. Inchial suddenly asked another question. Would you intend to enroll in the elective course I teach? He calmly answered, are you referring to basic equipment studies? This surprised Inchial. You know about that course? Si-hoon nonchalantly confirmed, yes, I do. He privately judged it to be one of the class's Babel funds most heavily. Si-hoon was a bit uneasy. What should I do now? Before revering time, I had never heard the name Kim Inchial, so the professor's fate might not have been pleasant. However, presently he was a professor receiving a lot of attention. Si-hoon cheerfully replied, I've decided to take that course. Inchial asked with concern if he was sure, since he'd already enrolled in many electives. Si-hoon calmly explained that adding this would only make it his 4th elective. Inchial had no objection and shook Si-hoon's hand, saying he looked forward to working with him. Si-hoon politely replied likewise. At the same time, the system notified that it was extracting a link from the entity Kim Inchial. The link with creator Lee Si-hoon is currently at level 1. Link Kim Inchial, fire-bearing iron, high-grade, mid-low quality. A metal that contains fire within. It has properties similar to wood in that it can hold flame inside. Si-hoon pondered that if someone can extract metal from another person's body, that means they could also forge and temper the human body itself. When multiple types of attribute mana coexist in one body, they will cause conflict with each other. Because this is extremely dangerous for a blacksmith who requires absolute precision, using only the single attribute that best matches one's aptitude has become an unwritten rule. However, I am an entirely different case. The internal mana used to suppress the heat is gradually being consumed in a controlled way. Once the body has its mana reservoir emptied, it will begin to draw the essence of the deep crimson flame inward. What I must do as a blacksmith is establish a specialized mana circuit for the deep crimson flame within my own body. After a moment, Sihun breathed a sigh of relief. He understood clearly that only then could he perform forging and casting within his very self. The system announced, your attribute mana has increased from Bloodfire grade F to Bloodfire grade E+. A series of notifications followed. You have learned the S-rank skill called soulsmithing magic. The body is the most primitive material a blacksmith can polish. When the internal mana channels are tempered, physical capabilities rise and strength is enhanced. All base stats clearly increased thanks to the skill. Lee Si-hoon, Strength D15, Durability D100, Mana D19, Speed E87. Si-hoon gritted his teeth, thinking soulsmithing magic, huh? He recalled how he had struggled in his previous life when Lee confronted him. You already have the materials, so are you going to give up without even trying to process them? She had smiled and asked, aren't you a fool? Are you really going to accept that without resistance? Back in the present, he smiled with satisfaction and resolved that yes, he had to make full use of everything available. And regardless of whether the opponent is an ally or an enemy, this time he would not let himself regret anything. In a large stone-paved building, a voice announced, today we will finish the items you have crafted in recent lessons, as the completed products are intended to be supplied both inside and outside the academy. The red-haired man stood with his hands on his hips before everyone and declared that today's results would determine the course of the entire first semester. So give it your all now so you won't have regrets later, understood? Everyone shouted in unison, yes sir. Si-hoon looked at the metal bar in his hands and thought. Everything was truly a mess. Because his current body couldn't keep up with the reflexes, many details were off. He held a hammer in one hand, thinking this is no longer a time for leisure. Flames erupted and waves of fire slashed straight through the area. A pot of boiling water steamed. Si-hoon held the long bar and silently observed the result. This should be acceptable. But he grew worried, thinking that with the remaining time finishing the other pieces would be extremely difficult. If he did everything only at an average level, he might receive additional budget support. He placed it on the grindstone, but ultimately pouring his effort into creating at least one truly high-quality item was the right choice. His hands deftly ground the metal bar. He stood there fully focused. That sound surged through Si-hoon's head like the approach of an apocalypse. His gaze dropped. Whenever he heard that distinctive sound, he produced superb items. All his concentration went into it with the thought that this is not mere temporary sharpness, but a blade engraved into its very form. Lights flashed below called White Radiance. The information became clearer. The White Radiance greatsword was finally completed. A great blacksmith always reveals his will through the most basic things. The technique of a craftsman who knows how to fully exploit a material's potential to forge a new blade is truly deserving of the highest rank. A notification appeared. You have mastered the skill called White Radiance Flow C. 2 gleaming swords materialized with their details. White Radiance Greatsword, rarity, rare, quality, high. This greatsword possesses a pure, immaculate white blade. The blade is finely honed and combined with a mana arrangement that makes it both incredibly durable and razor-sharp. A masterpiece born of an exceptionally skilled smith, its cutting power increases when mana is channeled into it. Si-hoon held the freshly forged weapon and exhaled, thinking that given he only used ordinary iron, this result was acceptable. He hoped that by looking at this weapon, some of the skills from before he reversed time would gradually return, even if only a little. The two knights behind him held their swords anxiously and whimpered, I really hate this feeling. Maybe I should consider dropping out. The next day, Saturday morning, the red-haired man sat in a cafe intently looking at his phone. A voice spoke up, I didn't expect you'd want to witness my enhancement technique. Si-hoon looked around on the way over. Well, I'm actually quite curious about your basic techniques. It seems crowded here. Lee, walking beside him, observed and said, don't worry too much, my workspace is in a much quieter area. The two of them headed toward a peaceful farm area and asked in turn, isn't this place a bit far? Did you think I'd be able to easily watch your technique up close? She pulled him into the Acklecuff smithy. This is the place. She stepped in and called out loudly, ma'am. Her voice rang out, I'm here. Helena sat inside picking her ear with her pinky and frowned. Am I deaf that you have to shout like that? Si-hoon, trailing behind, seemed irritated and asked when she inquired, who's the kid with her? Is he her boyfriend? Lee stood before him and replied, of course not. He then smiled slightly as she spoke. He's this year's top entrant in the Borsapa department. She retorted, Babel must be heading into decline to accept someone who looks so frail. Helena pushed herself up from the table, saying, my name's Helena. Si-hoon then introduced himself. I'm Lee Si-hoon, a freshman in metallurgy. She seemed furious. Enough chit-chat, get to work. This week's backlog piled up because of you freshmen. Lee glanced away and sighed. Yes, I know. She pointed toward the back room. The entrance to the forge is this way. Looking at the items in the room, Si-hoon thought the woman's skill seemed deeper than he'd expected. He followed behind, scrutinizing every detail, unable to understand why someone like her ran a smithy here. She walked ahead, examining each piece, nodding the workload was indeed backed up. A colorful tray sat on the table. This was the enhancement color palette, and these were powders ground from magic stones. He stood with his arms crossed, glancing and thinking. He knew the usual standard was 8 colors, yet she used them far more diversely. Then he asked, is your job to restore damaged enhancement formulas using these? Lee picked up a paintbrush. Exactly. One hand held a pan while the other dipped the brush into the palette. That way I can both earn money and freely perform enhancements without worrying about material costs. The painted strokes shimmered with color. A simple pan in her hands became impressive. Si-hoon stood there silently observing, thinking. I came here because it looked like she was experiencing a workflow stall. He recalled a memory of someone telling him, a has-been drags failures into every test and can't even keep the top spot in their own department. The image of Lee focused with her brush and pan sparked thoughts in him. Indeed, seeing it firsthand, he thought he'd found the cause and a solution for her stagnation. With those thoughts, he turned and walked away. Being able to immerse oneself in work like that is a talent. His hands in his pockets, he stood before a wooden table. An item on the table caught Si-hoon's eye. This would resonate with the mana arrangement to produce a special effect. He leaned in to look more closely. After a long time carving white radiance again, his hands were itching to try it. Helena, standing behind, saw this and said, try using it. She frowned while standing behind him. Of course, if you have the ability to do that, pick any piece from that pile. He glanced back in surprise, feeling as if she were deliberately ordering him around. He looked up. If I'm allowed to use a grindstone of that quality, I definitely have to try it once. Then his gaze fixed squarely on it, his hand wrapped around its handle. She stood behind with her arms crossed, watching. Are you really going to work on that piece? Si-hoon excitedly touched the blade. Yes, looking at the even wear and the unwarped tang, you can tell this is a knife made by someone who truly understands sword use. He stood at the table holding the grindstone and thought, this grindstone has mana grains compressed most evenly. Using it could handle even sharpening the blade to its final edge limit. His hand moved with practiced care as he placed the knife on the grindstone. Helena, standing behind, had a big question in her mind. Is that kid really a freshman who just enrolled this year? Lee, standing behind, excitedly called out, startling her, it's finished. She was then startled and realized, oh ma'am, when did you get here? She didn't turn to look and muttered, I have no idea, that girl. Lee stepped up beside her and said, you deliberately looked for faults in your junior, but in the end he taught you a lesson, didn't he? Helena shoved her hard with her hand, angry, shut up right now. She looked toward Si-hoon, who hesitated. Have you finished all the work? He smiled and replied, this is the best I can do right now. Next time I'll definitely do better. Helena hefted the sword down hard. All right, then both of you go home early. Lee looped her arm through his and stepped outside, glancing back. She's just being grumpy for no reason. Let's go. Inside, she stood with her hands on her hips where he had been working. Suddenly, a well-dressed man in a suit knocked loudly on the door. Sister, are you forging something? Helena peered out with a scowl. Keep it down a bit. He hurriedly scratched his head, embarrassed. The backlog of orders is huge. What about the kitchen knife? His somewhat agitated words spilled out. When will you give up that restaurant job? A person who should be a combat department professor. She snapped back angrily. Stop nagging about others' hobbies. He stepped in and picked up the knife on the table. Ah, here it is. Suddenly, he sensed something unusual. He frowned and turned. Sister, did you sharpen this while drinking again? She stood there, arms crossed and head down. I didn't do that. He continued, could this be the work of those new close assistants lately? Their skills would have to have improved dramatically for that. Helena bowed her head and closed her eyes. It's a freshman. He turned, unbelieving. What? Her eyes opened and she replied, a new boy who just enrolled this year is the one who sharpened it. Recalling the image of Si-hoon in that remark, who the hell is that guy anyway? Si-hoon stepped outside and asked, that old woman at the smithy used to be a former instructor in the metallurgy department. Lee, strolling beside him, replied, yes, I've heard she retired 5 years ago and returned to Akelcuff to open this shop. He glanced down at her. Could there be more to it than that? She glanced back. I'm not sure either. Probably nothing too extraordinary. The academy's image formed as she spoke. Over the past 5 years, quite a few professors have left the metallurgy department. He looked over and replied, I see. Sihun kept thinking, if this place is destined to become Babel's weakest department, it's clearly a matter I can't ignore. Lee put a hand to her chest. More importantly, what do you think of my enhancement technique? He was startled and looked down at her. The basics are certainly solid, it's pretty good. Her face swelled with pride. Oh please, it's not that big a deal. He grew slightly deflated and said, however, your mindset is still too narrow. The air seemed to darken as Lee leapt forward to face him. What did you just say? Sihun pointed straight at her. You've already come up with better options, but you're afraid to apply them. She stammered back, how could you possibly tell that? Lee fell silent, bowing her head to hear the critique. If you don't know, you can learn, but if you know and still don't do it, that's the real problem. A smith's imagination is their weapon and innate gift, yet you're suppressing it. Everything shattered inside her, as if it were me. Do you think I do these things because I don't understand them? Sihun winked, sighed, and felt around in his jacket for something. Then he pulled out a sword, surprising her. I have another plan so I can't perform for long, watch closely. He then brought out a stone underwater as an example. Suppose someone asked you to place a stone beneath the water's surface. Creating the stone and dropping it is the blacksmith's work. The image fades, but engraving the image of that sinking stone onto the water is the art of enhancement. That's why enhancement always carries the nature of dreams. A sword appeared with red lights swirling around its bloodfare. The sword flew before her in surprise, wrapped in the powers of white radiant swordsmanship. The powerful image formed. Don't only affect the outer shell, imbue that enhancement deep into the core of the weapon. He studied the knife in his hand and the energies swirling around it. If one layer isn't powerful enough, split them into multiple tiers. Sihun pushed it down hard. As she followed that method, he threw it forcefully backward. It stood upright and plunged straight into the ground. Everything seemed to pause along that power path as he looked down, thinking seriously. Though he couldn't claim this was a canonical enhancement technique, if it's Lee. Seeing her stroke her chin reinforced his thought. Geniuses like her usually find their way even when hesitating. Suddenly Lee panicked and pointed back. Junior, lend me that item for a moment. Please, please let me borrow it. She stepped down and pulled Sihun like a swing. I promise I'll perfect it and return it, please, please. He broke into a sweat at the nape of his neck but produced the item. I don't mind, but if you're taking it, also take this. She leapt up, elated as if receiving love. Thank you so much, I love you to death. She disappeared, leaving him standing there alone. Sihun exhaled as he received a notification that a link with Lee Claudel was being established. Creator Lee Sihun's bond level with the subject Lee Claudel is now at rank 1. He also spoke up, that girl really is still childish. Standing in the crowded campus, Sihun looked around and thought, today I finally have a chance to meet one of those 3 fierce hounds, the duels between the Berserk Hound and the Radiant Slayer in their youth. He remembered Erica walking behind him, which made him think, but more importantly he then asked, what are you doing? She whispered eerily, just following you. He replied indifferently, so if I told you to go somewhere else now, would you go? She stepped up to his level. I would go, I can perfectly watch you from afar. Sihun glanced back, breathed a sigh of relief, and thought, I figured she'd do that. Then he stepped in, come on, let's go inside. An item like a frozen snow ore appeared with a description. Social pact linked to Erica Inao, grade, rare, quality, low is average. An artificial ore refined with mana that stabilizes internal mana chaos when mixed with other minerals. Another magic stone appeared with a notification, Lee Claudel's complex burst link, grade, rare, quality, supreme. A sharp, multicolored ore that serves as an excellent amplifier to fully unlock the potential of composite materials. On the stadium's big screen, a cute Lan Fang appeared, warmly welcoming the new students of Babel Academy. Welcome to the famed arena tour. I extend my sincerest greetings to you all for this ranked match. She struck a pose and winked on screen. I am the youngest professor in the martial arts department and today's commentator. My name is Lan Fang. Under the spotlight, her voice continued. Then let's not keep you waiting. Let's introduce today's fighters. The tall silhouette of a woman appeared under the lights. First, look this way, the valedictorian of the 4th year from Akar Quif and the future heir of the Myers family, famed for producing S-rank heroes. She swept her golden hair back with her hand. A perfect superhuman who has repeatedly broken records and held the arena's top spot for 3 straight years. She is currently an active A-rank hero and our champion. The pretty face of this girl was revealed, also a sword saint, the last to conquer the summit of the hero tower. Arya Myers. Loud cheers rose as Sihun and Erica folded their arms and looked down. Sis, take me with you, Arya's shining, Fang narrated. The first challenger to dare face today's champion was shown. A man with a long sword on his back, a living intangible cultural heir of Korea, successor of the flame wheel scorch spear technique, valedictorian of the third year in the trade department, and a strong candidate for the arena's top 10. Sihun looked down and thought, so we finally crossed paths. The man stood there exuding power, the berserk hound. Fang loudly called his name, Yom Seong-ha. Each sword stroke burst into flames, but halted just above the ground. Arya on the other side skillfully manipulated her sword. She launched a strike that made him leap backward. He gritted his teeth and forced himself. His hand clutched the wooden rail beside him. Arya's eyes flashed with menace. Then flames coiled into a circling ring around her, as if directly aiming to attack Seong-ha. This made Sihun, who stood above, think. Even accounting for his youth, he still hasn't reached the required standard. Could it be that he hasn't received support commensurate with the air title of the Flame Wheel Scorch Spear? Seong-ha held his hand back in a ready stance. Many things made him uneasy, but the biggest obstacle was the equipment he was using. But he hurled it aside and prepared to lunge forward. A long, sharp blade sliced past and grazed his throat. Seong-ha looked alarmed at the blade at his throat, then he fell silent. I've lost. Arya cheerfully rested her sword before her. You fought hard, the match is officially over. The final victor was Arya Myers. The two of them stood on the same dais. Fang held the mic and continued. Next we'll conduct interviews with both fighters as planned, but student Yom Seong-ha had to leave early due to unforeseen reasons. She covered her mouth and laughed. Facing the 9th ranked directly right afterward was truly too much for me. Seong-ha slipped away quietly as the lights converged on Arya. Or I'll fill this gap with a live Q&A with myself. Audience up there, enthusiastic as always, do we agree? Sihun up there winked and thought, that guy looks really upset. He suddenly stood, making Erica turn. Are you going to skip the rest of the match? He put his hands in his pockets and answered, yeah, I'm not very into that fighting style. He walked off while saying, look at her. Standing there looking impatient, Erica turned with some concern. It's a relief you're not there to meet your brother, but why is he so furious? Suddenly a voice spoke beside her. An interesting freshman, huh? Has Arya always stood there looking back? Orange eyes looked back with hope. Perhaps we've found someone like that. Seong-ha was meditating in a park near the martial arena. Sihun quietly approached, thinking Yom Seong-ha was still alive and fairly well. Seong-ha replayed his flashy strikes in his mind. Though his temperament was a bit canine, he remained a core member of the Suicide Squad, and was the last to sacrifice his life to destroy the Apocalypse God's transformation. Standing behind him, he thought, since he hasn't become completely corrupted, maybe this time I'll collect the link stones more easily. Seong-ha frowned and bowed his head. You were watching the spar earlier, weren't you? Sihun put his hands in his pockets and replied, that's right, I watched a bit. His head slightly turned back. Finding me here means your strength isn't mediocre. Seong-ha turned and looked slyly. It's you again. Why is the valedictorian of Borsipa's department showing up here? He stood there, worried about why the other had such a harsh attitude, then spoke. I came hoping we could discuss a little. Then he turned back to the original direction. Get out of my sight. Sihun slowly stepped forward. This will truly benefit you, senior. But the other squatted and replied, maybe you still don't understand, so I'll say it once. I utterly despise the weak. He stood, Seong-ha, especially those who can't do anything for their family, and those who mistakenly think their petty tricks are on my level, so whatever you want to discuss, just go back. A line that stunned him into silence. Lowly blacksmith. Remembering what Seong-ha had done in the past, go back to your workshop and forge gear. Know your limits and stay in your place. This didn't trouble him much. Compared to his days as the so-called mad dog, he looked rather politely bored now. Sihun was performing a charm in his palm and thinking, judging by that attitude, I know for sure words won't resolve this. Seong-ha also glanced back, as if he was absolutely determined not to stop. He stepped up to where Sihun was casting and spoke. I also want to tell you one thing. The next words stunned him. The history of the Flame Wheel Scorch Spear will be ended by your own hands. So Seong-ha lunged forward at full speed. His hand clenched as he unleashed his power. His punch was thrown, but Sihun blocked it. A notification popped up as he was blasted away. The greed-killing link mark had been officially activated. He frowned in confusion. Did he just dispel one of my mana-enhanced punches? Embers curled around Seong-ha as he focused on him. No wonder he was elected valedictorian. Perhaps at last he truly merits standing and speaking with me. His demeanor turned more intense, yet the trajectory of the scorched fire mana still lingered. This is the true power of the Flame Wheel Scorch Spear. It ends here. The two of them flew straight at each other. Sihun formed a shield and hurled fire toward Seong-ha. Smoke billowed and obscured him. Then he slowly emerged from the smoke. From afar he looked surprised. Why can those fire motes that normally respond only to his mana be held in that man's hand? Terrifying things seem to be approaching. Has he split them and stolen them? Suddenly a cluster of flames streaked past his throat. He looked ahead and thought, that bastard. Xiang-Ha, bracing himself with his purple power, took a fighting stance. He seemed on the verge of going insane and losing control. The image of a pink-haired man shouldering a weapon at the gate of the disaster at Hao Hua sect probably erupted because of this hot-headedness. A punch from the man was about to be thrown. It struck precisely just as the victim thought the greed-killing effect was about to wear off, and his endurance had reached its limit. As the fist neared Si-hoon's face, the duration of greed-killing expired. His body could no longer hold on. They fell as if gravity had been lost from above. At the same moment, he seized Xiang-Ha's punch, surprising him. But no, it was Jake forcing his way in to catch the blow, startling him. Jake Myers. He then spoke, "Do you know the valedictorian of Borsippa?" The other stammered in reply, "Yes, well, sort of, we know each other." After that, he pulled his hand back and moved to a quieter spot. "Leave here at once." Jake awkwardly shouted, "Yes, sir," then turned to him and said, "Si-hoon, let's go." He glanced at him, his face pale with fear. "Remember what I told you, don't say those weird things again and get out of here quickly." Across, Xiang-Ha stood alone in thought. "I couldn't hold back my emotions and threw that punch. I nearly stained the honor of the flame wheel scorch spear and brought disaster on my master." His gaze dropped downward. On the street, Jake walked ahead of him. "What the hell were you thinking, picking a fight with that senior? If I hadn't stopped you in time, you might have died." Si-hoon bowed his head and breathed a sigh of relief. "No way, it's not that easy," he said beside him with concern. "What did you say?" A notification appeared before him. "A link with the target Yom Xiang-Ha has been successfully established." He said, "I was only issuing a threat to him earlier." But the thoughts in his head also surfaced. The next step is to extract the link stones. Thinking of Xiang-Ha's fierce fighting image, yet the person I knew was truly the mad dog Yom Xiang-Ha. If he's still this weak now, the effectiveness of the link stone could be altered. I need to calculate how to raise the link level with Yom Xiang-Ha. Then he looked at Jake and thought this guy might actually be useful. He asked, "Is your hand injured?" He beamed and pointed at the wound in his palm. "It's fine, my hands are naturally tough." Si-hoon glanced over, thinking his hands tough. How ridiculous, he turned and said, and more importantly. He held out his hand in gesture. "What did you say about my sister at the arena?" Si-hoon, surprised, asked, "You mean Arya Myers?" He replied, "Yes." Si-hoon answered, "It's nothing major, I just thought she's a bit proud." Jake clutched his head in terror. "What? No wonder she kept pestering me about everything concerning you." Si-hoon stood there thinking of Arya. "She's definitely started to take an interest in you." Si-hoon went cold as he recalled the woman mentioned. "My sister seems to have started noticing you." The sister mentioned? Arya was smiling. He sighed helplessly. How does she hear that in such a noisy crowd? Her ears are sharp. Jake tried to warn him, "Next time please speak quietly. My sister is an A-rank hero." Si-hoon put his hands in his pockets and taunted. "Actually, if it's just simple interest, I'd gladly accept it." He looked at Jake, who was tearing his hair out in despair, and thought the biggest concern for Yom Xiang-Ha is likely defeating Arya. If I attract the attention of her rival, my influence will naturally grow. He put on a bored expression and sighed. "Don't underestimate that. You don't understand what my sister really is." Before he could finish, Si-hoon suddenly cut in bluntly. "A petty, scheming person, right?" Jake jumped and reflexively looked around. Maybe you shouldn't use words that harsh." Suddenly his face grew solemn. Si-hoon fell silent at the question. "Why do you hold such animosity toward my sister?" The girl in armor with golden hair held a powerful black sword, the sword Saint Arya Myers. She, with the stance of a monarch, faced the monsters head-on. It too had once been a soulless dim blade. Beneath the deep black moon, Arya spread her wings and raised that sword to the sky. One day the sword saint suddenly vanished without a trace, and the one who emerged afterward turned the remains of a Ma god into their own weapon. The Ma god of annihilating light. Si-hoon in the shadows only showed a faint smile. Just looking at her face is trouble. Then he strolled off, waved a casual hand. "I'm leaving." Jake stood dumbfounded behind, still not understanding what had happened. What just occurred? He suddenly noticed the ringing of his phone. On his phone screen, he received a message from Arya Myers' sister. It read, "It seems you've just made a very interesting friend. Tell me all about it later." He read it and flinched. Does she mean I now have to act as a bridge between the two of them from now on? Suddenly his eyes froze and went pale. Arya sent a message that hinted slyly, "Your petty, scheming sister just asked you for a favor." Jake stood dazed on the street reading the message. Damn it. Cut to the next morning in a lecture hall at Babel Academy. Si-hoon sat in class and placed a hand on his shoulder, wincing. "Did I go too far confronting Yom Xiang-Ha yesterday?" Hands, sitting at the front, mouthed, The schedule for the exchange session will be set soon. Reese barreled into the class driving a tiny cart, cane in hand, and shouted for order. He walked to the front, cane raised, and launched into an introduction. My name is Reese Dova. I'll be teaching your major classes for the next 2 weeks, and my lessons will focus on attribute refinement. The students in the room went pale when they saw him, all thinking the same thing: that infamous professor is a total madman. Reese calmly spoke with seriousness. Before we begin, I have an announcement. You must make the most of this opportunity and submit your homework to me by next Thursday. First is David. At his name, David startled and answered, "Yes, sir." Tiny Reese sat on his cart comfortably holding a sheet of paper, and the last name on the list was Lee Si-hoon. He rose at the call, hands in front, glanced down, and wondered aloud if anyone was curious how much money he'd get. The student beside him thought the amount would be 3 times his own. Reese suddenly announced clearly, "As for Si-hoon's budget, it has not been officially released yet." He heard that and jumped in surprise. "What did you say, sir?" He purposely let his bangs fall over his eyes because people kept mocking his outdated, ugly hairstyle. Reese calmly stroked his white beard and explained that because the quality of the piece you submitted reached an unusually high level, far beyond expectations, the school decided to include it in the public auction for second-year students this Wednesday. He continued explaining the reason: "We will set your budget based on the final hammer price, so be patient a little longer." Si-hoon stood still, frowning and thinking, could this be Vice Principal Michael's ploy to intervene separately like this? His mind kept mulling it over, but then he thought if there were any irregularities, Professor Kim In-cheol would have already stepped in. He then replied to him, "I understand the situation clearly, sir." Reese, who didn't look scary, beckoned them into the next lecture. Today's topic is surplus mana. An outstanding student has volunteered to assist me in this advanced practical session. Please come in, it's Seong-ha. He appeared and entered the class as Reese introduced him to everyone. "This is my temporary assistant, Yeom Seong-ha, a third-year martial commerce student at DAGGER QUF." A student next to Si-hoon exclaimed in surprise, "Why did that famous senior suddenly show up here?" Everyone was as excited as if they'd seen a beautiful girl. Yeom Seong-ha stood beside the professor as he continued the lecture. "Introductions are enough, let's grasp the basic concepts before moving to practice." The round specimens that emit mana used in weapon forging were mentioned. Surplus mana mainly comes in 2 forms. The first is the basic energy charging type. The second is the independent type that can generate mana itself or absorb it from the surrounding air. Both have pros and cons, but the independent type is far more difficult. Reese taught theory sternly. The reason is that there is no fixed standard for constructing a mana core. It varies depending on materials, technique, and the mana source of the creator. He looked at Yeom Seong-ha standing beside him and continued, "Therefore, you'll all start with the energy charging type first. Assistant, please come up." His hand began to clench and tense, emitting a red mana. A stream of red mana started appearing in the classroom space. Fire-type power is prone to erupting, which makes it hard to become usable surplus mana. He formed 2 streams of red mana that met into an arc, but if one can restrain that nature, it reveals an excellent storage capability. Reese continued explaining based on the simulation Seong-ha created. A prime example is the technique my assistant is demonstrating right now, the Flame Wheel Scorchtember Spear. Hands froze in shock witnessing the display. Can someone control fire mana to that degree? The student beside him was equally amazed. Even managing a forge is beyond me. Reese raised a device from the lectern. "Since we're fortunate to have such a talented assistant, make the most of this opportunity. Submit your assignments before next Thursday." The whiteboard listed his requirements clearly. The theme is fire-type surplus mana in the energy charging form with the motif of a wheel of fire. He emphasized thoroughly that you may create anything you like as long as it stays on topic. Reese sat on his little cart, excitedly twirling his cane. "Now let's move quickly to the refinement room. Oh, and don't forget to change into your gear." After he left, only Yeom Seong-ha remained standing there. The other students suddenly rose. This is the chance. Hands and a few others nursed the same thought. A golden opportunity to speak with Senior Yeom Seong-ha. Excited, he stepped forward and greeted, "Hello, Senior." He looked very polite and was about to introduce himself. "I'm Hans," but before he finished, a gloomy atmosphere radiated from around Yeom Seong-ha. "Go away at once." Hans didn't dare linger and left dejectedly. Yes, the mood of the class suddenly turned gloomy. Xiangha stood motionless with a cold expression and his eyes closed. Those sharp eyes suddenly opened and looked in a direction. As Sihun was minding his own business, preparing to leave the classroom, Xiangha spoke up. "Li Sihun, stop and answer me. What do you know of me?" A muscular man's body emitted a spiraling red mana. "I heard the proficiency of the flame wheel scorched timber spear is judged by the number of fire wheels. Li Wan Ryong, current head of the Flower Fire sect and an rank hero, has reached 8 wheels." Sihun walked more slowly toward the door and answered, "Because the 3 wheels you just produced were very easy. If done correctly, you could maintain 6 wheels simultaneously." Yom Xiangha quickened his pace to follow and called out, "Wait, what do you mean by that?" Sihun suddenly spoke, causing him to freeze. "You've touched the 7th wheel before, haven't you?" He casually shoved his hands into his pockets and baited him, "But one day you won't be able to hold it." Xiangha stood behind, trembling with anger as he watched Sihun's retreating back. "How could he know that when I haven't even reported to my master?" His face went ice cold and his words turned chill. "You see, I have some natural talent for controlling flame, but when I watch the fire you wield, something feels very strange. You can't detonate the remaining surplus force completely, or rather, you're letting it scatter chaotically." Xiangha stepped closer and asked directly, "Do you know the reason?" His face went blank and his eyes widened when he heard it. "I have a few guesses, but I don't see any need to tell you." Yom Xiangha exclaimed, dumbfounded. "What?" He stood behind, tightening the arm at his side. "State your request." Sihun didn't hesitate and raised one forefinger. "First, you must pay a price worthy of any advice or help from me." 2 fingers appeared on his hand. "Second, when facing difficult decisions, you must consult me." As soon as Sihun finished speaking, he walked on. "Tell me your decision before we step into the refinement room." Yom Xiangha leaned from behind and without hesitation or further thought replied, "I agree." His tone turned serious as he set the condition, "Only if you can prove it." Time passed to the afternoon at the smithy. In this area, a few people in identical uniforms were working. Sihun concentrated on picking up a piece and placing it into the hot forge. He's crafting without even sketching a draft. Does he mean he won't test the selected stones before firing them? Fire ore and shadow ore were mixed in a 7-to-3 ratio. 2 people approached his busy back and whispered, "If you just shove them in like that, won't all the attribute mana dissipate?" Why would the top student of the department do something so reckless? His gaze didn't waver, he focused on calculating. The temperature was raised until the attribute mana began to seep out. Sihun quickly took off his glove, plunged his bare hand into the flames, and used mana fire control to hold the attribute in place. This was the heat replacement technique. Reese broke into a cold sweat watching from outside. He's performing heat replacement right now. So that's why Professor Kim In-cheol accepted the public auction submission. A faint smile tugged at Sihun's mouth. To ordinary eyes, it looked like a normal heat replacement. But to Yom Xiangha, an entirely different scene must be unfolding. At another moment, someone silently opened their eyes wide and said, "Watch very closely." A black shoe reached the pedal and pressed the toe down. A burst of red flame mana mixed with a hint of black erupted. The fire mana spreading outward was drawn inward, while the shadow mana digging inward was placed outward. This maintained the balance between the 2 opposing mana flows, forming a perfect circle. Xiangha stood with folded arms, seemingly focused but feeling let down. "Is that all?" Sihun's pupils spun like fire wheels. "My second mana attribute was forbidden because it was thought to hinder the flame wheel scorched timber spear." Yom Xiangha still looked stunned, eyes wide, scratching his head. "If I use it this way, I drop to the 5th wheel." Sihun jumped at that. "What?" Xiangha performed 5 wheel rotations right before him and explained, "I succeeded in completing the black fire wheel but lacked the stamina to sustain 6. Sihun insisted that in any case the black fire wheel is stronger than 7 normal fire wheel. He looked a little troubled, squeezed his eyes shut, then turned sharply. Flower Fire sect periodically sends instructors to test the skills of their active air apprentices. A massive black dark circle is created for the fire mana to pass through, and if someone falls below the 6th wheel, they will be stripped of their inheritance position." Sihun nonchalantly offered the old solution, "Then I'll just do it the old way this time." Xiangha, frustrated, created a small circle in his palm, but that wasn't enough. The black mana was released powerfully. After my shadow fire mana wheel, it could no longer be controlled. Sihun also felt a headache and furrowed his brow. "When will that instructor arrive?" Yom Xiangha answered him immediately, "Tomorrow." He put a hand to his chin, closed his eyes, and looked off to think. He had said losing the inheritance position meant immediate expulsion. A method must be applicable within a single day. Suddenly, he slammed a hand down on Seongha's shoulder. You hey. Si-hoon, looking excited, asked right then if Seongha's inheritance position could be preserved if he did something. Seongha answered briefly and seriously, I can. His gaze turned serious again. Good. Si-hoon smiled, then produced with both hands a red blackstone, linked to Yom Seongha, a high-grade red resonant blackstone of the best quality. A type of ore where fire and shadow attributes coexist. The waves produced by these two attributes resonate with the innate power. First, we'll change your weapon. Seongha then led him to a place to look. A high-end room, the private training chamber of DAGGER, only allowed for top-tier members in the dojo's top 100 or the department's top 30. Si-hoon entered and could only sigh, what a show-off. He tapped the blue screen. You can change the interface here too, right? I'll tweak it a bit. The two stood still as they watched the interface change before them. Si-hoon pointed and teased Seongha, Flower Fire Sect, you miss home that much? He calmly explained that his master sent it to him, so he only uses it occasionally. He took out the blackstone in his hand and looked at it excitedly. Then let's begin crafting the training tool. With a single light snap, the blackstone cracked gently in two. A linked high-grade red resonant blackstone, the ore where fire and shadow mana coexist, whose waves resonate with innate mana. A long-pointed weapon was just finished, done. Seongha took the two spears in his hands and inspected them with some concern. Handling one spear was awkward enough, let alone two. Si-hoon, however, was very composed. This is better suited to controlling two elemental mana types. Si-hoon, facing him coolly, pointed and instructed. From now on, create a fire wheel with your left hand and release shadow mana with your right. He was a bit surprised. Just release it. I confirm, yes. Seongha closed his eyes to keep calm. His expression sharpened. Holding the spears front and back, he spun them once. Seongha suddenly had to stop when he realized the spears were emanating mana. He didn't understand and stared at the spears. What was that just now? Si-hoon calmly pointed and explained that he had inadvertently let shadow mana spill into his left hand. He felt mana radiating from the spear. Different attribute mana mixing and leaking out is natural, but in his case it was chaotic to the point of self-suppression, probably because he'd been suppressing his shadow mana all this time. Si-hoon fitted a ring onto his wrist, so if he can get used to managing both mana types simultaneously, reaching the sixth wheel will come quickly. Wear this while training. Seongha looked at the wrist ring and smiled. You've got nice gear. Then he trained continuously with the spears in various stances. 3 hours of training passed. Si-hoon stood outside observing, smiling in satisfaction at the progress. He adapted quickly. Could it be because this training method was devised by his future self? Feeling through every cell of his body with the surrounding mana to see how skilled his past version was. Breath, muscle movement, shifting the center of gravity. Waves of mana flowed through his body and emitted from the spear's tip. Si-hoon noticed his gaze and curiously asked, what are you staring at? Si-hoon cupped his hands under his chin, looking very innocent. What do you think? I'm just collecting data. He rested for a moment and brushed his cheek with his hand, then suddenly froze. I need it to craft the weapon I'll use. Si-hoon sat casually in the chair. I made this to submit as an assignment, so don't expect too much. Seongha turned his face away. Who would expect a weapon made by a freshman? Si-hoon wouldn't sit still. He glanced off to one side casually. Seongha swung both spears down flat from above. Is there any reason you must hold onto the inheritance position? He didn't turn back and answered briefly. My master wants me to become the sect leader. He stood there with the spears hanging loose, his voice cold. As a disciple, I simply follow his will. The one who adopted the orphan Yom Seongha and cared for him was an S-rank hero and the first sect leader of Flower Fire Sect. The photo on the wall clearly displayed that person's face and name. Yom Jinhyun. When he was young, he sat beside Seongha, patting his head and teaching him. Although he lost his power after retiring due to injury, as a teacher and a father figure he still wields absolute influence over this guy. Si-hoon brought his hands together, closed his eyes and recalled their meeting. Get along with each other, link level 3, yes. Seongha narrowed his eyes toward the corner and wanted to know why he was helping me. His brows knitted and his eyelids shut tight in thought. It was another bleak, ruined place stretching from the forest to the city. The 6 great demon domains, areas once swallowed by chaotic swamps, now teeming with demonic beasts. Si-hoon sat with his legs draped over the side of the chair facing him. I plan to infiltrate all those domains. To do that, I need people to protect me, and I need materials to craft weapons for them. He didn't hesitate to offer an ambitiously designed hand. If you're going to be the next sect leader of Flower Fire Sect, your skills and finances should be decent, right? Seeing that attitude, Seong-ha was left speechless, practical indeed. Si-hoon became serious and frowned. Of course, we haven't known each other long, so why would I do charity for you? What? Seong-ha tapped the spear against his shoulder. He meant to say if I receive help, I must pay a proper price. He glared and leveled a spear at him with sharp eyes. Help me become the sect leader of Flower Fire Sect, and then I'll follow you into the 6 great demon domains. The earlier memory suddenly resurfaced in Seong-ha's own voice. Make me a weapon. Now I'll slay the demon gods for you. A grin spread across Si-hoon's mouth. From between his fingers, he produced a brand new blackstone. You don't regret this, do you? The blackstone in his palms generated fierce mana continuously. Now, whether you like it or not, I will make you the sect leader. The red resonant blackstone link mark was activated. At the common training hall on the first floor of Flavium, Hyonan appeared formally with his attendants. Long time no see, young master. I am Gang Hyonan, 7th rank instructor of Flower Fire Sect. Seong-ha noticed 3 people behind him. Who are those? Hyonan extended his hand to introduce them. They are disciples personally selected by the head instructor. The donor asked me to broaden their horizons with a sparring match between me and the young master. He even covered his mouth and giggled when mentioning it, because the young master is the most talented after the successor. Seong-ha, displeased, warned him, Hey instructor Gang Hyonan. His gaze turned icy and fixed on him. The successor to the sect leader hasn't been decided yet. Watch your words. Hyonan still wore a blatantly casual smile. I sincerely apologize. Perhaps I was momentarily mistaken. Hyonan extended his arm and got serious about the matter. So shall we begin the competency test? Seong-ha bluntly refused. No. A title appeared within the half-ring swirl. I request to take the promotion test to 7 rings. Hyonan put on a disdainful look. A fool who only trains dares to dream of the sect leader's seat. He recalled the words of the one who would back him and sneered. If Yom Seong-ha wants to challenge 7 rings, then defeat him thoroughly. Whatever happens, I will arrange it properly. Hyonan stood opposite him and explained at length. From level 7 onward, the exam will include direct combat with an instructor. Young master, you should also consider senior elder Yom Jin-hyun at headquarters. For you it's still too early. Seong-ha stood there unconcerned. You're saying too much. Seong-ha even dared to poke at his pride, as if worried about being stripped of his instructor rank. Hearing that, Hyonan flew into a rage and immediately called out, Quickly bring my spear here at once. This 7-ring promotion will be conducted in the form of a domain duel. He held the upright spear. The domain duel is actually simple. It's a pure test of strength. Whoever has the stronger fire wheel wins. The condition for promotion is that you must win or at least draw. Seong-ha's eyes sharpened. He gripped 2 blades at the call. Fine, let's begin. At first seeing his weapon, Hyonan covered his mouth confidently and sneered, using twin spears, how unsophisticated. Seong-ha paid it no mind and, eyes cold, swung the 2 spears forward with fierce fire mana. Hyonan still stood there reproachfully. Have you forgotten all the warnings to suppress your shadow attribute mana? That kind of chaotic flame will never be recognized as a fire wheel. Si-hoon grinned as he formed spinning rings of fire around himself. Let's see what happens when we really provoke it. Hyonan seemed very confident. With a single twirl of his spear aimed back, you'll regret this. He began to seriously spin and generate circles of fire. Light from the fire attribute mixed with the shadow attribute erupted. No one could be seen. His eyes suddenly widened at the form of a black dragon that pierced through the rings of fire and devoured them. What the hell is happening? My fire wheel is being swallowed. Is it being torn apart completely? The crazed black eye was stunned. And just seconds later, the spear in his hand shattered into 3 pieces. Hyonan fell to his knees on the ground before the ruined weapon. Seong-ha stood arrogantly with his 2 spears before the broken, dejected figure. You called it unsophisticated. Si-hoon watched from behind with slight regret. What comes next? Such a waste of excellent materials. Seong-ha spoke to him holding the 2 spears. Once the promotion ceremony is held soon, I'll officially be recognized as Yomwa's instructor and the legitimate successor. Si-hoon lowered his head curiously. How can he sit in the sect leader's seat? Seong-ha glanced sideways and said 2 conditions must be met. First, reach 8 rings. Second, obtain the consent of the majority of the other instructors. Si-hoon squatted near the ground and picked up the spear fragments. Even if he reaches 8 rings, can he get them to agree? Seong-ha immediately asserted firmly, I can win that consent through competition, so it's not a problem. However, it won't be a domain duel then, so things won't be as easy as today. He heard that, stood up and slipped his hands into his pockets. Then it shouldn't take too long. Seong-ha stood beside him, gripping his spear seriously and said, Sounds a bit too easy. Sihun replied casually, I'm saying that because it seems entirely feasible, just look at today's result. What are you looking at? He asked with even eyes. From now on you should think about how you'll pay this price. Seong-ha closed his eyes and looked calm, a smile tugging at his mouth as if he could comply. Just tell me what you need to settle this, cash or materials, I'll provide whatever's within my means. His voice dropped to a serious tone. Moreover, I have another item I'd like you to make. Sihun glanced at him, surprised. Another order so soon. Suddenly, Seong-ha tightened his grip on the weapon in his hand. These are good quality, but I'm just borrowing one to submit to class. His mouth curved into a premeditated smile. If he can produce them in just a few short hours, I'm really curious how the next spear will be forged. Seong-ha banged his fist into Sihun's shoulder. Make me a weapon that's even easier to use. Sihun strolled alongside him. Put that spear down, you almost stabbed us. What did you say? The link index with Yom Seong-ha rose to level 2. As the bond strengthens, the relationship between the two becomes more solid. The current bond target pertains to transactions. Each completed transaction with the subject forms a link stone. The crystallization speed of the link stone accelerates during transactions. There is no limit to the number of stones. Cut to a crowded auditorium with a spotlight on the stage at the auction house. The host, looking urgent, waved to introduce. Thank you all for patiently waiting. The periodic auction of the refinement department's second year may now begin. Sihun appeared seated in the audience. He hadn't expected such a turnout today. Erica beside him noted his outfit. Did you change your style? He only folded his arms and met her gaze. Professor Kim In-cheol reminded me that outward appearance matters, so I've been more careful. Apparently being top of the class really is something different. In-cheol appeared composed under the stage lights. It would be hard to publicly control someone who is the center of attention. Sihun sat with his arms crossed, a sly smile on his face as he watched. I'm curious about Michael's plan to seize control of the refinement department. Today's theme is iron swords. There are 36 entries, and we'll add a special quality inspection step. Per the host, a white cloth was brought out. This fabric is seogium, woven from the melted fur of an S-rank beast, the white tiger. It's soft yet as durable as metal and resists slashing attacks. Another assistant solemnly struck the cloth with something sharp, thanks to that property. A loud ripping sound tore through the room. The host pointed to the demonstration on the floor. As you can see, to increase lethality, we can easily spot items that have had their durability reduced. In this auction, we'll use seogium to weed out such defective items. A sword was the first item handed over, and now the first piece being presented is the blue trident by student Josephs. The crowd began to murmur, oh, that looks interesting. They seem to have prepared thoroughly. Erica glanced sharply at Sihun beside her. Do you know why they did that? He analyzed a white tiger beast with blue irises. Most people only know the white tiger's body is sturdy, but its abilities are actually a bit more complex. Its fur, flesh, and bones all possess completely different properties. Notably, its fur can mimic the sharpness of any metal weapon that touches it. So no matter how good a weapon is, it will gradually wear down in durability. Erica placed her hand on it and pondered seriously. Wouldn't that put the White Radiance greatsword at a disadvantage? Swords that prioritize sharpness usually have very low durability. Sihun propped his hand on his chin, eager. Exactly. This is clearly an obvious trap aimed at me and Professor Kim In-cheol. But if the sword breaks here, the reputation of the supervising professor will be severely affected. That only happens if it wasn't crafted carefully. On stage, the host struck the auction gavel hard. The 25th sword sold for 4 million won. The final sword was brought out and the host began the introduction. And now finally, sword number 36. By first-year refinement department valedictorian Lee Sihun. The quality inspection process for the White Radiance greatsword will now commence. The moment the sharp blade struck the white cloth, a powerful force erupted. The man gripped the sword's hilt tightly and clenched his hands, but the sword suddenly flew out of his control. Michael, having witnessed the scene, froze and his face went pale. Just now. The White Radiance greatsword was still sharp, only the tip had been partially broken off. What just happened?